It's been a while since I've talked about Mega Man, and for good reason, honestly. Look, when you play a series of games so similar to one another in semi-quick succession like classic Mega Man, you just get sick of them by the end. Aside from playing through Zero and ZX again with that Legacy Collection, I've barely even played this series in the last 2.5 years. This video is kind of fun to look back on though, especially Mega Man and Bass, which is one of my most viewed videos for some reason. Apparently I have the wrong yet very cold take of not liking Mega Man and Bass. And also some people think 8 is worse, which is just so... what? I'm just some random guy talking about video games on the internet. Don't take me too seriously. Also, it's weird how that I can't make this joke anymore.
And Light has such a bad speech impediment that he makes me sound normal.
When we find that meteor, we'll find Dr. Wowie.
It was funnier 6 years ago when my voice was worse. Oh god, that was 6 years ago? Time is fleeting. Anyway, I've decided to descend into madness once again, but this time with Mega Man X. And if you know anything about Mega Man, you probably know about Mega Man X. For the Super Nintendo, Capcom looked at this and said, hey, what if we made this better? You know, I think they were onto something. And you probably already know that, because aside from Mega Man 2, X is probably the most talked about game in the series. For good reason, mind you, because this game kinda kicks ass. When I first played Mega Man X in, 2017, I think? Dude, I had a blast. Everything about the game just feels good. Every stage is well designed, the controls are perfect, the music is awesome, everything about Mega Man X is incredible. And odds are, you probably heard this whole thing before, which kind of puts me in a weird situation. I like talking about underappreciated games because I can say whatever I want, still feel like I said something that hasn't already been said by a billion other people. And I've reviewed popular games before, don't get me wrong, but there's just something about Mega Man X that feels like it's already been overanalyzed to hell and back. Like how the intro stage is smarter than general relativity or something. Point is, will I say anything original within the next
25
minutes? Who knows? Here's another Mega Man X review. Remember the happy-go-lucky classic Mega Man games? You remember how happy and healthy Dr. Light looked? Yeah, well, this is him now. Instead of living out his retirement in peace, he decided to work on his final invention, a Reploid. Robots that can think for themselves and make their own decisions. But the first Reploid being known as Mega Man X. But Light knew that he was gonna die before X was ready, so he made an AI of himself to watch over X and perform tests and all that junk. Cut to 100 years later in 21XX, and X is awoken by Dr. Kane, who used X's specifications to make more Reploids. But the new Reploids didn't get the same level of testing as X, so some of them bugged out and decided to go commit crimes. So many Reploids started going Maverick that they had to form the Maverick Hunters to stop them, with Sigma, Dr. Kane's most powerful Reploid, leading them. But then Sigma goes Maverick and it all falls apart. So now X and Zero, another Maverick Hunter, have to stop Sigma's plans every other week until the end of time. There is a bit more to it than that, but a lot of this stuff is explained in X4, so I'll save it until then. The game itself, though, it doesn't have much. Dr. Light explains before the title screen about how Reploids have free will and how X is the first one and all that jazz, but there isn't any kind of context as to what's happening. Some Reploids have gone Maverick and X has to stop them. Boba Fett calls himself vile in this game, and he almost beats X in a forced lost fight before Zero comes in and saves him. Can we talk about Zero in this game? He's one of the best characters in the franchise, but he's practically a plot device in his first appearance. I guess he's motivation for becoming stronger, oh ho ho, you might even become as powerful as I am. But Zero doesn't do anything. X does all the work. He saves X from Vile again later and gives you the arm parts if you didn't have them already, but otherwise, he just shows up occasionally and gives X a pep talk, refuses to elaborate further, and then dies. It's so bizarre that such an interesting character started out as nothing more than a guy who fires 2 shots at Boba not. Oh yeah, Zero dies. Don't worry, that's gonna happen a lot. The only kind of interesting dialogue is right at the end, as X contemplates the meaning of war and why we have to fight. That we live in a society or something, I don't know. It comes off more generic than anything else. They needed something against this end screen, so the philosophy, yeah, that sounds good. Anyway, Sigma isn't dead, go by the next game. The story of the first Mega Man X is really basic, but it's at least better than the NES Mega Man games. They attempted something, but they didn't really do anything with it yet, which is fine, I guess. The gameplay is anything but fine, though, and you can tell just from the intro stage. It teaches you everything about the game invisibly. It's peak game design. I'm not going too deep into this, though. It's already been covered to death. But the main thing you should figure out from this stage is how wall jumping works. Wall jumping is a pretty neat ability in platformers. You know, you jump off the side of a wall to get some extra height. I have no idea how feasible this is in reality, but it's cool and fun, so who cares? But it works differently in Mega Man. It's not really so much a wall jump, more so a wall climb that you can do infinitely. And pretty soon after, you get the ability to dash, which lets you move faster and jump farther. And I was never really that into classic Mega Man. The game did control well, but it was never fun to control. You just move at a steady pace and shoot enemies. It's all well and good, but it was missing something. Wall jumping and dashing is that something. It improves the game's pacing so much. From Mega Man 3 onwards, you could slide to move faster, but you couldn't jump while using it, making it feel too clunky in my opinion. You could move faster, but part of the control was taken away from you, which didn't feel good to me. With dashing, you can not only jump while using it, but dashing also makes you jump farther than you can without it, and it even works jumping off a wall. These two abilities not only make the skill ceiling that much higher, but they also make the level design change drastically. There's no more screen transitions except for boss wars, so there's nothing to break the pace, letting you dash as much as you need or want to. Wall jumps also let the stages be a lot more vertical. It always felt clunky with something like a Like Man stage because of how awkward all these precise jumps were. You needed to be just right with your precision, and it just didn't feel good to play. Something like Quick Man stage worked a lot better because falling felt more natural. But now, wall jumping makes these vertical sections way more fun. It just feels plain cool to jump off of everything in Bruno Kuwanger's stage. You don't even need a wall to wall jump off of something. As long as it has some kind of vertical height, it is legally a wall and it can be climbed. It's surprising just how much you can wall jump off of, even moving platforms like near the beginning of the first Sigma stage. And that's another thing, wall jumps can let you save yourself if you just barely didn't make a jump. It's a neat way to make the platforming more forgiving without making the game easier. You can even use this to dodge enemy attacks. Climbing a wall gives you a lot more room to get out of the way, and it extends your own attack reach. It's unreal just how natural wall jumping and dashing fit into the standard Mega Man gameplay. Like, these two mechanics alone completely change and improve it. Despite how different the moment-to-moment gameplay feels, the actual structure of the game is basically the same as the classic games, aside from the intro stage. You have 8 stages, each with a boss that gives you a new weapon, and each boss is weak to another boss's weapon. Finish all 8 stages and you play through a few more stages, ending with a final boss. It's a video game. But even this structure's been tweaked a bit. Your health is noticeably lower than before. That's because there's actually upgrades that you can find in each stage. Heart tanks increase your health, sub tanks let you store up health to use when you're low, and armor parts give you new abilities. Bizarrely, that dash that I mentioned before is not part of X's base moveset. You have to get it in Chill Penguin stage first. Out of everything Mega Man X does so well, this is probably the game's biggest flaw. Gaining new abilities is rad as hell. The Metroidvania elements give the game that much more flavor. But it basically means you always have to play Chill Penguin first, which is boring. There are ways around it, like you could put in a password to start you with the leg parts and no Maverick is defeated, and there's a ROM hack that gives you a dash at the start. But it feels like a band-aid to a very blatant design flaw. I understand not wanting to introduce too many mechanics at once in the intro stage, but I feel like there could have been some way to introduce it without it needing to be an upgrade with a light capsule. Maybe Zero could have told you about it or something, I don't know. And at least on Super Nintendo, there's only 4 face buttons. I feel like you could have figured out that one of them makes you move faster. The other armor parts don't have too much wrong with them though. The chest parts double your defense, the arm parts let you charge your special weapons along with giving you a 3rd level buster charge, and the head parts let you headbutt these hyper-specific blocks to destroy them, and it's only used once in Flame Hammer stage to get the arm parts, and you don't even need to do that because Zero will give it to you if you don't have them anyway. So basically the head parts are only there to complete the look. You can't just walk around looking like an idiot. It's all about these sex nowadays with you kids in your drip. I don't know. The leg parts also let you destroy the same blocks by wall jumping off of them, which is only used twice. With all these extra pickups and everything, you'd think there'd be a lot more backtracking, but there really isn't. If you go in weakness order, starting with Chill Penguin like I did, you only have to backtrack like 3 times. Once back to Kuwanger stage to get the heart tank because it bizarrely requires his own weapon to collect it. Once back to Spark Mandrill to get the sub tank, but even that's right at the beginning, so you can immediately exit. And once back to Chill Penguin to get the heart tank with the fire wave. Even then, there is some leeway in how you can get a lot of these. Like, you're supposed to use the boomerang cutter to get Spark Mandrill's heart tank, but with some well-timed dash jumps, you can get it without it. Or an Armored Armadillo stage is a lot easier to destroy these minor things with the fire wave, but you don't need it if you match the fire button enough. I think you can get some stuff with a charged shotgun ice too, it's just the weapon's a bit awkward for me to use. I'd rather just use the boomerang cutter. It's not too hard to figure out everything without a guide either. I've only played X1 twice before this, and I accidentally figured out a good route just from memory. Keep in mind that it's been like 4 years. I last played these games when the X Legacy Collection came out. All these collectibles might be a bit much to keep track of at first, but everything is so memorable that I didn't have any trouble finding anything. That makes a casual playthrough more satisfying for me. I don't have to write anything down or keep track of much. It's just easy to remember where everything is. The incredible level design absolutely helps. There isn't a bad stage in this game, and they all feel unique. My favorite's probably Armadillo because you're always moving. There's these minecarts that plow through everything, and it just feels good to ride them. It's a nice place to fill up sub-tanks and stock up on lives, too. It's just a really fun stage. I also really like Boomer Clanger and Storm Eagle. They're much more vertical than classic Mega Man could be, and you just feel like a badass climbing through these. The closest this game has to a bad stage is Launch Octopus, and even then, the only bad part is this mini-boss can suck you into spikes. Like, dude, why? Aside from that, it's still a fun stage. Like, you know how you can jump really high in water in previous games? Well, what if you could jump really high and really far? That's just what this stage is. Jump over everything. Have fun playing in the water. We are men of the sea. What I love about these stages is that clearing one stage can affect another one. After defeating Storm Eagle, the airship he was piloting crashes into Spark Mandrill's power plant, so now all the lights are out and it's harder to see. Or how beating Chill Penguin somehow causes Flame Mammoth's factory to freeze over, so you don't have to worry about the lava. That's just cool, man. I really wish they brought this back more. I don't remember if X2 or X3 did this, but I'm almost positive they dropped it completely with X4 onward, which is a shame. It's such a cool way to tie the stages together, instead of having everything being completely disconnected. The end game is great too. The same stage design extends all the way to the end, albeit a lot more basic. Like, there's no real theming or anything, it's just generic bad guy base. Feels more like a test of skill than anything else. The Sigma stages are definitely a lot harder without its special weapons, that's for sure. They weren't very useful in the main stages aside from getting items. The X-Buster is generally good enough for most situations, but there's a lot more awkward enemy placement in the Sigma stages, so the homing torpedoes are great for that. Along with a charged tornado, which even normally does pretty good damage for those tanker enemies. A charged chameleon sting also gives you temporary invincibility, so if there's a really annoying section, it's easy enough to just damage boost through it. Even the boss rush isn't annoying this time, mainly because it takes place over the course of 3 stages instead of all at once. I'd much rather it not exist at all, but I didn't mind it in this game. The bosses themselves aren't much to talk about though. If you use their weakness, most go down without much thought, especially Spark Mandrill. Like, if you have Shotgun Ice, you already won, look at this. The only main boss that still puts up a fight is Armadillo, but even he's fine once you get used to him. The endgame bosses are pretty easy to get to grips with too. The only annoying one is this spider boss. It's moving down this track and changes lanes every time there's a web between them. It's just that it moves so fast that it's hard to process what it's doing. The spider isn't too bad, it just takes some practice. I've heard the bosses are way harder Buster only, but I am a sissy baby man and I haven't done a Buster only run. Sue me. The game's an awesome time playing normally, and I do not want to ruin it trying to fight Sigma without weapons. Everyone likes to complain about how tough Sigma is, but with weapons, he's really not that hard. Not Treble is easy to get past. I don't think I've ever died to him, just spam Shotgun Ice. The second phase has Sigma dash around the place with a lightsaber. Again, pretty easy. If you've seen the DVD logo, you can figure out what he's doing. The first 2 phases are just basic pattern recognition. The third and final phase is the hard part. He's gone up into this mech thing, you have to jump onto these claws to safely damage him. But the claws also shoot thunderbolts both up and down, so you can't just camp him from his hands. The challenge with this phase isn't dodging his attacks. The challenge is hitting him to begin with. You have to get to the top of the screen to hit him. And you can't use a homing torpedo or a charged tornado either, because the X-Buster and Rolling Shield are the only weapons that can damage him. With the claws rotating around in a circle near the wall, you can't climb up there yourself without stupidly precise timing, forcing you to wait. But at the same time, you can't just stand around in the center because he'll shoot down lasers or fire from his mouth. Moving to one of the sides to dodge that leaves you open to the lightning from the claws. So you simultaneously have to be constantly moving, but also not moving much so that you can climb on top of one of the claws. It's all just a balancing act. Once everything lines into place and you get into the rhythm of staying on the upper part of the stage and consistently hit him with a rolling shield, you basically won. You'll probably die a bunch to get there, but he's a lot more manageable than people make him out to be. I'll take X1 Sigma over X4 Sigma any day. But hey, at least whenever you die and use up all your sub-tanks, it's easy enough to use a charged rolling shield to refill all your health and weapons. Plus, this spot is his own stage, so you don't have to worry about lives and you can keep retrying. It's forgiving enough to let you learn the patterns and practice until you overcome it. I like that. But we still have a remake to talk about in Maverick Hunter X. Despite how much I love Mega Man X, I never felt the need to play Maverick Hunter X before this. After remaking Mega Man 1 for the PSP, Capcom decided to remake Mega Man X while they were at it. And if you had no idea that this game existed, that just speaks volumes of how well the original's aged. I didn't look at Powered Up when I was doing the classic games, but honestly, I'm really glad I didn't, because Mega Man Powered Up is basically a janky NES game disguised as a PSP game. Despite how Mega Man 1 hasn't aged very well, they went ahead and decided to not update the game design in any significant way. I really have to wonder why. A remake is the best possible time to do this, and they included a mode where you can play the original game basically 1-to-1 without the 2 new stages, so why? It's not that Powered Up was a low-effort remake or anything. There are 11 playable characters, each with unique voice-acted dialogue. They put a lot of effort into this game. They just put that effort into the wrong places. Even the 2 new stages aren't that great. Powered Up is such a weird game to me. Mega Man 1 is fun the first time to see where it all started, but I can't fathom why I would ever want to play the game with 11 different characters. You can update the aesthetics and add all the content you want. At the end of the day, it's still Mega Man 1 with the abundance of disappearing blocks, awkward level design, and the Yellow Devil, except they removed the exploit that let you kill him near instantly. I bring all this up because Maverick Hunter X doesn't have any of these issues. The level design is still largely the same, but it didn't need updated. They added voice acting like they did in Powered Up, and it's oddly decent. I just love how mad X sounds when fighting Sigma.
Our potential is limitless.
You think you have potential? You're insane, Sigma!
That's not what you really think. You say you believe in justice, but that's not true. You've only been led to think that. Nothing more.
This stuff really adds a lot more personality to the characters. I never expected Launch Octopus to sound so sophisticated.
Maverick? How dare you call my artistic battle style by that name?
I assumed he sounded like a Splatoon character, honestly. Chill Penguin, however, sounds exactly like I thought he would.
Sigma has paid for the use of my power. Working for him is a million times better than piddling around on a South Pole with nothing to do.
Oh, and Boom and Kwanger and X used to be friends. That's pretty cool to learn. Sorry, Boomerang Kwanger. Next will tell me he's gonna go collect Thunder Eggs. Not all the voice acting is good, though. X yells out the weapon name every time he uses it, just like one of my Japanese animes. I could never remember the name of Boomer Kwanger's weapon, but trust me, that will never happen again. The anime cutscenes are cool, too. They even went out of their way to make a 20-minute long prequel explaining how Sigma went Maverick and decided to take over the world. That's insane, and it's a good watch, too. They included it in the X Legacy collection if you want to watch it in higher quality, so you're not actually missing out on that with the new X release. I'll get into this collection next time, though. There was enough to talk about already. The gameplay isn't completely one-to-one with the original. There are some things that actually mix things up a bit, like how Vile was an actual boss in the intro stage instead of a forced loss. The armor parts are in different places too. Well, they're in the same places, but the parts you get are different, like how the leg parts are in Flame Man the stage and are optional now. It's easy enough to get to since you don't need the head parts to get to the capsule anymore, but it's a weird change on paper that I actually really like in practice. Since you get the leg parts in Flame Mammoth, now we need the head parts for the sub-tank, which is in Chill Penguin. That's really convenient because you need to freeze the lava to get the heart tank. Even going in weakness order, there's still about as much backtracking as before, aside from needing the boomerang cutter for Spark Mandrill's heart tank, because apparently that super tight jump wasn't intentional. Cool. It's just a neat remix of the game. It's still Mega Man X at its core, but changed enough to be interesting. I also like how the bosses have slightly longer invincibility, so it's harder to stunlock most of them. But in some hilarious twist of irony, Spark Mandrill is easier to stunlock now. Like, they had to have known. I refuse to believe this wasn't done on purpose. Weirdly, the Sigma stages are mostly new. The levels themselves aren't too interesting, but they weren't that interesting in the original, so it evens out. At least you can just shred through the dumb vacuum fish. That felt really good, man. I also like how the spider boss got a bit of a rework. It moves slower and takes longer to start moving, giving you more time to actually process where it's gonna go. It's kinda easy now, but I'll take that over annoying any day. The weirder change is how Vile was fought at the end of Sigma 3 instead of 1. So if you didn't get the arm parts, you only have charged weapons for like 2 fights. Zero apparently gives you a different charge shot than the light capsule does, so that's cool. But I don't know why you wouldn't just get the arm parts and Sting Chameleon instead. I suppose that Zero dying right before the final fight makes it a lot more climactic. It always felt odd that he died right at the front gates. Dude's supposed to be insanely strong, but barely does anything. It feels more in character this way. Getting so far yet so close makes his non-death more impactful.
Go now, Maverick Hunter X.
I take it back. I wish Zero died sooner. They ruined the final boss though. The first two phases are basically the same, but with the third phase, you don't have to wait for the claws to come down toward you anymore, completely decimating that balancing act that I was talking about before. It turns out this fight is easy when you can consistently hit him. I wrote that part before playing Maverick Hunter X. I figured that it was my armchair game designer brain coming out. I didn't think I'd actually be right. I beat Sigma on my second try, and that's only because I wasn't paying attention the first time. So if you hated the original final boss and thought he was way too hard, you'll love this game. There's some cool extras after the credits too. There's a new game plus where you can play through every stage of all your upgrades. It's oddly satisfying to plow through the intro stage. Day of Sigma is a full-length anime episode that details how Sigma went Maverick and leads into the events of the game. It's actually a really good watch. The lip syncing is a little off at times, but that's my only major complaint. I was actually annoyed when it ended because of how into it I was. Like, no. You can't just make something this good and then only go for one episode. Day of Sigma really shows the potential for Mega Man X as an anime series. X and Zero are interesting characters, at least by X4, and there's a story here worth telling and expanding upon. Apparently the producer of the Castlevania anime is also producing the adaptation of Devil May Cry, so if Capcom is willing to do this kind of thing with their IPs, give Mega Man that treatment next. If a probably low-budget OVA produced for a video game is this good, just imagine what could be done with a standalone series. You know, it's really weird how Battle Network is the only branch of Mega Man to get a full adaptation. In fact, it got so full of an adaptation that it had to make stuff up halfway through. And while I'm on Copium, a Mega Man Zero anime would be rather sick as well. But back to the actual video game. You can even play as Vile. The obvious thing was to let you play as Zero like in later games, but they actually made a new playable character for this. That's pretty cool. The main thing with Vile is that he can't dash, but he has a different weapon for square, triangle, and circle. A Vulcan machine gun thing from his hand, a shoulder cannon that shoots diagonally upwards, and a bomb that explodes on the ground. Now, you may have noticed that all of these suck. Well, at the end of every stage, instead of one weapon, you get a myriad of new ones, including multiple different kinds of weapons for each slot. Like, maybe you don't like the Vulcan gun, so you can use this shorter range missile attack instead. This is objectively wrong, but you can. This may seem like Vile is stupidly versatile, but no. You can only pick your loadout at the start of the stage, which is kind of a bummer, but I also get it. Having this many options that you can swap to at any time would be ridiculous. And there is a weapon point system restricting you on what you can take, so it's not as overpowered as it seems. But it still doesn't take that much effort to break the game. You have way too many options, so there's bound to be at least a few that are insanely strong. Like how the Distance Needler does a lot of damage and pierces through defenses. So those Sniper Joes or those dumb launch octopus mini-bosses that suck you into the pit go down laughably easy. And it even does pretty good damage to bosses. That's probably my biggest issue with Vile's campaign. The game was already relatively easy, but Vile just makes it completely brain dead by the end. I could have tried experimenting with weapons more or something, but when you find a good weapon that keeps working, it's hard to want to try anything else, since you're gonna have to play the whole stage with it. Boss weaknesses aren't a thing either, as far as I know, so every boss goes down the same way. Bosses were still easy with their weakness, but it at least required more thought and experimentation than just holding down the square button. Shell Penguin and Storming will also increase their defense and movement speed respectively, so by the Sigma stages you're a god, especially if you got all the heart tanks and sub-tanks, which are in different places for the most part, so that's kind of interesting, along with a slightly tweaked level design, but Vile really isn't anything too special. You also have to listen to like one song pretty much the whole game, the only exception being the Sigma stages. Mega Man X's soundtrack is awesome, so why not just play this during the intro stage and then play the regular music everywhere else? And despite having to listen to this track for 2 hours straight, I can't remember it no matter how hard I try. That's just sad. Playing as one of the antagonists is cool, but even that falls apart once you get to the final boss and kick X and Zero's asses. Despite completely curb stomping them, X and Zero still win somehow. Vile just sits there while X fires a single attack at him.
On a charge shot!
Like, I don't know, dude, have you tried shooting them? I just wanted to play the alternate reality where the heroes lose. Is that too much to ask? There's no Sigma fight, which makes sense, but it just ends with a really easy boss that you lose to anyway because of plot armor. Vile is at least enjoyable, but I probably won't play his campaign again. X is just a better time. I do appreciate the effort, but it just leaves you feeling empty. Because Mega Man X is so damn good that it didn't really need a remake. Maverick Hunter X is still a good way to play the game, but it makes a few too many weird decisions to be my preferred way to play, which just speaks volumes to how well the game's aged. Like, dude, it's insane just how little I've complained about any of this, especially after playing through it 3 times for this video, and I'd still be down for another go. Mega Man X is a wonderful time. to the surprise of no one. Why do you think this game is talked about so much? Because it is an extremely good video game by the video game developer Capcom for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I was having trouble figuring out what to even say here, but honestly, I don't really have to say anything else about Mega Man X. Video game good, like, comment, and subscribe. With the success of Mega Man X and Capcom's love of money, the logical next step is to make a sequel to it, which they did. 7 in fact, plus Command Mission and Extreme, but I'm not getting into that. I don't really have much to say about X2 going in, to be honest. After the massive critical acclaim of Mega Man X, X2 was met with a mostly, it exists response. People generally like it in my understanding, but it's not overly noteworthy than most. When you knock a game so out of the park like they did with X, it's understandable to not reach those same heights again right away. And personally, I've only played X2 like once back when the Legacy Collection came out. I remember enjoying it, but I don't remember much about the game itself, aside from some of the upgrades being annoying to get. Otherwise, this is a mostly clean slate for me. Let's see what's going on with Mega Man X2. It's been 6 months since Sigma was defeated in X1. The Maverick revolt is mostly over, but they track down the last of his followers at this abandoned Reploid factory. After the tragic loss of Green Biker Dude and a hilariously easy intro boss, we meet the X Hunters, who are trying to straight up kill X. They somehow have the parts to Zero, so X has to get the Zero parts back and beat up 8 more Mavericks along the way for no particular reason. It's Mega Man, what else do you expect? X2 has mostly the same structure as X1. 8 bosses, boss weapons that are good against other bosses, upgrades, all that good stuff. But X2 does try to shake things up a bit. A common criticism of classic Mega Man was that they're all kind of samey, especially on NES. Sure, they added charge shots and sliding over time, but the core structure and gameplay was basically the same, so the X series tries to mix things up a bit more. In X2, you've got the X Hunters to worry about. They show up in different stages in a seemingly random order, and you have to find them in the stage they're currently in and fight them to get a Zero part. That doesn't sound too bad, especially since you only have to worry about 3 of them. The problem is they only show up in stages you haven't been yet, and you have no way of knowing what stage they'll end up in next. Okay, that's not completely true. I think they rotate their stages in a set order, but it's not something you'll figure out just casually playing the game. They also don't tell you where they're going next, which means that the weakness order means nothing unless you're using a guide. My thought process was to not worry about the upgrades or boss weaknesses, as I don't have a real time limit on those. I can do a cleanup at the end, I just need to worry about the X Hunters. But the X Hunters are never on the main path, you have to find their special boss store. And in some cases, you can be locked out of it, like an Overdrive Ostrich. You need Wheelgator's weapon before you can fight the X Hunter, so there's a good chance you go there not knowing this and go through the stage, beat the boss, and not fight the X Hunter, and now there's one less stage they can be in. This isn't the only example. In Magna Centipede, you have to be quick enough to not only notice this door being here, but also have the reaction time to actually prevent the environment from blocking the door in the first place. And Wire Sponge is hidden below this elevator and can be easily missed, which I did miss. Crystal Snail's X Hunter room requires you to do some weird shenanigans with the right armor, so that's another one you probably won't notice. Most of these rooms are hidden pretty well. Like, there were multiple times where I went to an X Hunter stage and completely missed the door because I couldn't find it. Plus, they only show up after you've beaten 2 stages, so this means you really have to pay attention to where these guys are. And if you get unlucky, sometimes they just won't show up anywhere you have left to go. I went in with the mindset of prioritizing fighting the X Hunters, and I still missed one because the stars didn't align in my favor. Like, I even tried saving beating Ostrich for later because I couldn't beat him without his weakness, and I already got the like parts, but sure enough, the last hunter never showed up at Ostrich. I like the X Hunters on paper. It gives you a secondary optional objective to work toward. In practice, however, it's too annoying. You can't really plan your route without looking at where they'll be ahead of time. But after doing the endgame cleanup, I did end up finding where most of the X Hunter doors were. So if I did a second playthrough, I could probably fight all of them with relative ease. What you're supposed to do is find the balance of waiting to fight them when you're stronger, but again, it's hard to do that when you don't know where they'll be. You can look up a guide, but you shouldn't have to do that to figure out how to get a slightly better ending. Especially when you didn't need a guide for anything in the first game. Aside from the Hadouken, but that's more of an Easter egg than an actual upgrade. Now, to be fair, the X Hunters didn't really affect my enjoyment of X2 that much. Not beating all of them didn't really change anything. I'll get into that later, but missing one of the Hunters didn't make me feel empty and think there's no way that's what happened, like I usually get with bad or worse endings. The X Hunters could obviously be improved, just having them show up in stages you've already beaten would make them less of a pain in the ass. Again, the way they are now, they're not irritating or anything, but you're not getting the better ending on your first playthrough, that's for sure. Although, the X Hunters are my only real issue with X2. Aside from maybe stages no longer affecting other stages, like what the hell? Apparently some of the areas look different on the map screen after you clear stages, but I didn't notice, and it doesn't change the stages themselves at all. The rest of X2 is honestly pretty great. Speaking of stages, let's talk about those. Basically all of them are good. Bubble Crab is probably my favorite out of the bunch. It reminds me of Launch Octopus, but they embraced how fun the water physics are. Flame Stack has you going through a volcano and outrunning rising lava before the volcano erupts. I died to this part more times than I probably should have. Wheelgator takes place on, what is this, a giant battle tank? I don't know. Looks cool though. The background even changes over time if you just stand around and do nothing. That's an awesome detail. I also really like Crystal Snail. Smashing crystals with the right armor was a neat idea. All the crystals everywhere reminded me of Crystal Man stage from Mega Man 5. Wire Sponge and Morph Moth stages aren't anything too special though. Just standard stages. The junkyard becoming a robot graveyard aesthetics they got going on is pretty cool. I mean, these robots look like they're being hanged. That's... Do I really want to finish that sentence with awesome? Anyway, point is, that's pretty neat. Yeah, let's go with that. Neat. Magna Centipede is probably the only annoying one. Kind of a stealth level where you're supposed to avoid these searchlights, but it doesn't really punish you that much. To get the heart tank for this stage, you're supposed to not get caught so you can wall jump off the security drone, but you can just walk like 2 feet past it regardless. There's also a lot of moving blocks that just end up crushing you. The hit detection on them can be kind of wonky, so I ended up dying a decent amount of times for no real reason. It can end up feeling too much like pure trial and error instead of reacting to oncoming danger. I'm probably just bad at video games, but it was still annoying. Overdrive Ostrich is probably my second least favorite stage, but it's not to say it's bad, I just don't like the motorcycle gimmicks got going on. But it can be completely ignored, but it's kind of short if you do. So it's either an annoying stage or a short stage with nothing interesting going on. There's no in between. The bosses in this game are about what you'd expect. Hit them with your weakness weapon and they're pretty easy. There are a few that are pretty hard without them, but that's about it. I really liked how Morph Moth had 2 phases, but otherwise, no one's really noteworthy. Aside from maybe Magna Centipede, just because sometimes you'll warp to the ceiling, making it really hard to hit him with a silk shot. Oh, and Wheelgator takes forever, because you hit him with his weakness and then you have to wait for him to come back out of the water. It's just annoying. The weapons you get from them aren't overly useful either. A Crystal Hunter can crystallize enemies to use as platforms, which is pretty neat, but not as useful as it sounds. The strike chain is like a grappling hook that can pull you toward walls. That sounds cool as hell, but the range is short, and it doesn't work very well, so it's actually useless. Weirdly enough, the bubble shot is probably the best weapon in this game. It shreds through a lot of enemies and mini bosses, and if you charge it, you get this bubble shield that lets you jump way higher underwater and does a ton of close range damage. I expected this thing to be a joke weapon, but it actually kicks ass. That's crazy. The speed burner also gives you this flame charge attack when charged up, basically giving you a second air dash. I don't know, I'm not quite as familiar with X2 as I am X1, so maybe there was more use for weapons that I don't know about. All I really know is that I mostly just used the X-Buster this playthrough and got through it just fine, so yeah. On the subject of not being too familiar with X2, I decided to play it a bit differently than usual. For a lot of the classic games, I looked up boss weaknesses just to save some headache, but for X2, I decided not to use a guide for anything until the endgame cleanup. What, you want me to fight Sigma balls without all my stuff? That's just madness. So I can't really comment on the amount of backtracking this game truly has, because I did not play this efficiently at all. Out of the 4.5 hours it took me to finish the game, it took me 50 minutes to do the endgame cleanup and refill my sub-tanks and lives. This was because I had no idea what I was doing. The actual cleanup wasn't unfun or tedious though. It's weird, if you know what to do, getting the items in this game is pretty easy for the most part. A few of them are a little too precise for my liking, mainly the heart tank and crab bubble. You need to time your air dashes just right, and you can't really see where the rocket is before he jumps, so you just kind of have to guess whether he'll make it or not. It's possible that I'm just bad at video games, but I couldn't figure out a more reliable way of actually getting to it, even with a guide. Don't get me wrong, there's little consequence for messing it up. It's not hard, just annoying. I'm not sure if I'm even doing it right. A lot of the time I could figure out there was definitely something around here, I just wasn't sure how to get to it. I knew there had to be something above these rockets and wire sponge, but I didn't figure out how to get up there on my own. Had I looked around more, I probably could have, but honestly, whatever. That's on the easier side of the spectrum. A few upgrades are just outright cryptic. To get the overpowered Morph Moth, you have to use the spin wheel on this seemingly normal looking floor. Like, how was I supposed to realize this was breakable? Or how the heart tank and wire sponge is basically invisible? It's right next to the starting point, but I assume this was just a wall. I guess the indication is you can go through the right pillar, so you can also go through the left one, but it still just looks like a wall to me. There's 2 more annoying ones. I died like 20 times trying to get the heart tank and crystal snail, not knowing you were supposed to tap the hover to extend your airtime like in every video game ever made. I don't know how that went over my head. I know you're supposed to keep the bike for the whole stage and overdrive Ostrich to get the heart tank, but honestly, it's easier to just use a charged speed burner and take the death. Again, when you know what to do, it's all pretty easy to get. There's just some stuff that's harder to figure out than they should be. The rewards are worth it at least. There's a heart tank in every stage, this will be true in later games too. There's 4 sub-tanks to ease the difficulty and 4 armor pieces to power up X. The armor parts all do new things as well, except the arm parts, which is just an extra charge level unless you charge special weapons, same as last time. The biggest one is that since you already start with a dash, the leg parts will let you do a dash in the air, which really comes in handy later on. This is a really nice addition, it gives you a lot more control over yourself. Like, this alone is worth the effort. The body armor not only increases your defense, but also gives you access to the Giga Crush, which is a screen nuke that refills as you take damage from projectiles. But it weirdly doesn't damage bosses, so I don't know what the point of this is. There's maybe one part in the whole game where it's useful, but you still get the increased defense, so can't complain. I can complain about the head parts because it's pretty useless. Not completely, just mostly. You get this radar that tells you where hidden areas and passages are. That's basically it, and you have to activate it manually. The helmet was kinda useless before, but at least had some kind of function. This just tells you about things you can mostly figure out yourself. Keep in mind that it doesn't tell you where upgrades are, just passageways. I can appreciate the thought, but I hardly used it. The only thing left is the endgame. It's not really anything too special, it's at least more interesting than X1 Sigma stages, but not by much. The thing about X2's end stages is that each one has something annoying going on. The first stage has these walls that'll crush you if you take too long to wall jump off of them. That's fine, it's just the walls that are regularly shaped, so you have to move between them. It's doable, but doing this fast enough can just be annoying. Sometimes I can get it, sometimes I can't. Stage 2 has way too many spike pits. This part with all the rocket pillars is the worst because you have to wait around for them to line up to progress. Considering how fast-paced the game normally is, it's just annoying having to wait around for this one section. Stage 3 has the most annoying annoyance out of all of them. There's this platform that moves in a different direction each time you jump on it, and it just slows the game down too much. The direction it goes in next is predictable at least. That area underneath always rotates 90 degrees clockwise, so it'll go up, right, down, then left. But even if it's easy to figure out, it's still annoying and not very fun. Like, surely they could have come up with something other than this weird rocket platform, right? Otherwise, the last real end stage is the obligatory boss rush, just because. X1 made the boss rush a lot better by having you refight bosses over the course of the end stage instead of all at once, but every game onwards goes back to how it was before, and I will never understand why. I will never understand why this is required to begin with, but if there really was some mandate to do this at Capcom, they figured out a way to make it less annoying. Why would you throw that out? But after beating the X-Hunters in the boss rush, you find out, psych, Sigma's behind everything again. Bizarrely, the final stage is just the beginning of Magnus Centipede. Like, I'm struggling to comprehend the thought process behind this. Why bother? Surely modifying this stage to work differently at this point in the game would have taken more effort than to just make a separate stage that's just a boss store and nothing else, right? The first game's final stage was more or less just the boss. I don't see any reason why X2 couldn't do that. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Now, whenever you die to the upcoming 3-phase boss fight, you have to arbitrarily replay a part of the game that you already played. Sigma shows up with a remade Zero who then kicks your ass because this is the only hard part of the fight. It's actually kind of a weird fight. There's a lot of action games where you really need to be moving at all times. It's harder to hit a moving target, you know? But Zero only moves when you move. So if you fight him like a normal video game boss and try to avoid his attacks, he's super hard. But if you stand against the wall and try not to move much, he's fairly doable. You still have to find the right pattern and flow to it, if that makes any sense, but he's weirdly easy when you get the pattern down, while being basically impossible if you don't. It's a pretty interesting fight when you start to think about it. Weirdly enough, in the bad ending where you didn't get all the Zero parts, Zero remembers who he is after a good ass kicking, so he's implied to be his old self again. He's smoking and badly damaged from the fight, but Zero is Zero again. The other two phases aren't so interesting. Sigma is a pretty standard boss, honestly. This fight is kind of like the fight he had with a lightsaber in the first game, but now he has Wolverine claws and his attacks are easier to dodge. As long as you hit him with a Sonic Slicer, it's pretty hard to lose, especially when you have 4 filled sub-tanks. The final phase has Sigma turn into a wireframe for some reason. I guess Capcom wanted to show off their fancy new Super Nintendo graphics chip, so he was a wireframe boss. Sure, even though we already did this in Magnus Centipede stage. This fight also plays in slow motion. This is a good enough time as any to bring this up. X2 tends to slow down a lot more than X1 did. It seems to either play at full speed or half speed without any in-between. In X1, it only happened on occasion when a lot of stuff was going on, but here it seems like half the boss fights just slow down inexplicably. It's not enough to make me enjoy the game less, but it's still annoying. Anyway, just hit wireframe Sigma with a strike chain. If you came in with full sub-tanks, you can't lose. Especially since the enemies he spawns can drop health for some reason. Like, why does the final boss drop health pickups? The ending isn't much. Sigma's like,
I am inevitable.
X and Zero stare out into the sunset. We live in a society. By the next game. But what if you actually got all the Zero parts? Zero remembers X and everything that's happened even in the bad ending, so what's the difference? Well, nothing really changes. Sigma has a black armored replica of Zero that the real Zero then destroys and you skip the first phase of the fight. That's it. I don't think the ending text even changes. What's even the point in multiple endings then? It'd be one thing if Zero is now gone forever, meaning the rest of the games couldn't have happened or something, but no, same outcome, different means to get there. That's mainly why I don't feel empty like I usually do with bad endings. I don't know why they did it this way. Mega Man X2 was interesting. Here's the thing, X2 is a pretty great time, but a lot of the new stuff is a bit of a mixed bag. Fine when you know what you're doing, but it pretty much requires you to look up how to actually defeat all the X Hunters and find all the right upgrades. On a replay where I know where everything is, it's probably not as bad, but getting there isn't quite as smooth as just playing the game normally like with X1. X2 feels a smidge too complicated because of it. Other than that, X2 is more of the same. But when that more of the same is an insanely good game, that's hardly a bad thing. It's still got the amazing core gameplay that plays smooth as silk. X2's aged almost as well as the first game. It just does a little too many weird things for it to be as good as its predecessor. Like even during the more annoying parts that I've mentioned, I was still having fun. That should speak for itself. But ultimately, X2 is just pretty good, but not nearly as good as the first game. There isn't much to say about it beyond that. Mega Man X already had 2 games on Super Nintendo, so why not a third? Mega Man X3 is in a similar vein to X2. It's still got all the same core gameplay, but not remembered as much as X1 or even X2. Just another it exists kind of game. And honestly, I'm not sure if people even like X3. I've heard some people say it's good, but I've heard other people say it's bad, so I don't know yet. All I do know about the game is it is super hard, apparently. Fun. I attempted to play X3 back when the Legacy Collection came out, but I didn't like it. I don't remember why. I think I hated the stage design and thought the music was annoying. But that was like 5 years ago. I might as well have never played X3 before. Gotta try my best to go in with an open mind, you know? Oh god, this collection is almost 7 years old now. I am turning to dust. Well, I'm not getting any younger. Is X3 bad, or was I stupid and just wanted an excuse to go straight to replaying X4? Hopefully the latter. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, after having just played the game, I don't remember the plot at all. So, spoilers, this plot barely exists. Not that it matters. Anyway, this dude named Dr. Doppler figured out how to suppress Maverick tendencies to prevent Reploids from going Maverick in the first place. This clearly doesn't work, and Dr. Doppler makes a cult in a place called Doppeltown, a perfect utopian community. So you know it's awful. All of the Mavericks that were supposed to be neutralized started rioting, and X and Zero have to go stop them. Headquarters of the Maverick Hunters gets raided, and they try to set up this you can't trust anyone kind of subplot, but it doesn't go anywhere, and I have no idea who this Mac guy is. Let's say he's Steve Jobs. Mac kidnaps X and you get to play Zero to go rescue him. It's so sad that Steve Jobs died of Ligma. Yeah, this is the first game where you can play as Zero, and it's not as cool as it sounds. This is not Mega Man X4 Zero or Mega Man Zero Zero. Zero in X3 is exactly the same as X, but he has full health and a 4th level of Buster Charge that has him use a Z-Saber, and it kills basically everything. The way it works is that you can call Zero anytime by pressing R on the pause screen. I figured it's basically an easy mode that was to get past more difficult sections early on. That's fine. I tried switching as Zero to fight Blast Hornet, knowing I could easily win if I had a little more health, but it turns out that he can't use him during boss fights, so I don't know what the point of this is. On top of that, if Zero dies, he dies permanently. This dude has a permadeath mechanic attached to him, and suddenly, I don't care. I completely forgot that you can play as him by the end of the game, because there's really no point in doing so. The stages in X3 are shockingly one note. There really isn't anything interesting going on in them. Take Blast Hornet's stage. It's this shipping yard warehouse kind of place. Aside from these exploding boxes or these falling boxes, there isn't any kind of unique mechanic to make it stand out. And that goes for most of the stages. They're all just kind of straight paths to the end without any kind of gimmick to shake things up or any memorable set pieces. The previous 2 games at least had something interesting to make each stage stand out. Armored Armadillo had the rail cart thing. Boomer Kuwanger was really vertically oriented. Flame Stack had a volcano tie that you had to outrun, and those beetles that destroyed walls. Crystal Snail had crystals that could slide and some that could be destroyed. Overdrive Ostrich had a vehicle section. Stuff like that. At best, X3 has Toxic Seahorse with an underwater section, and Blizzard Buffalo with ice physics. And it's some of the worst ice physics I've ever seen in a game. Your acceleration is way too fast. You go from stop to zoom, like instantly. Even air dashing doesn't cancel out momentum. That doesn't make any sense. There's no stage in X3 that I particularly disliked, but it's hard to pick a favorite just because of how unmemorable the individual stages are. I guess Tunnel Rhino stood out the most, but it was mainly because it was noticeably harder than the rest of the stages. It also went an annoyingly long time in between checkpoints. Like, those are the only things that really stuck out. Although there is a system kind of like the X-Hunters. Basically, there's these two mercenaries named Bit and Byte that have been hired by Dr. Doppler to kill X. But also Vile's there too. I'm just calling them the X-Hunters too because Bit and Byte, but also Vile is a mouthful. Bit and Byte are required. I think Bit shows up during your 3rd stage, and I keep seeing that Byte is supposed to show up at the 6th or 7th stage, but he showed up at the 8th for me. I don't know, there's surprisingly little information about this game online. Point is, Bit and Byte are required. You will fight them at some point and die because they're pretty hard, but if you land the final hit with their weakness weapon, they die permanently, and you don't have to fight them in the final stages. They get replaced by a different boss. Bit and Byte are kinda neat. The idea is that they're bosses that you end up fighting on different stages depending on when you did what stage. That's some nice replayability. They feel like an improved version of the X-Hunters, and they don't even change the ending at all. At worst, you just fight them a second time. They die anyway. Vile is a different story. Okay, so in order to fight Vile, you need to find this random-ass teleporter in one of 3 stages, but you need to do this before you defeat both Bit and Byte, and ideally after you've beaten Crushed Crawfish or Neon Tiger so you don't have to fight him a second time. Then you play through this Metroid-ass escape sequence because he makes the factory explode, which I am down for. So Vile is optional and more complicated, but hey, at least it doesn't involve hidden values that the average player won't have the patience to figure out on their own. The X-Hunters 2 definitely have better execution than the first. It still retains that stage-to-stage element while also ditching any hard-to-figure-out mechanics. If you don't know what you're doing, then you just end up fighting them a second time. Not much changes. It's more fun for me that way. I'm actually already starting to run out of stuff to talk about, so upgrades. Aside from the heart tank and crushed crawfish, nothing's too weird to find. It's just that some things can be hard to figure out on your own. Like this heart tank is so easy to miss, it's almost comical. Although I'm not sure how you were supposed to figure out that the charged Triad Thunder destroys certain blocks, or just regular looking blocks. Like, what is going on in crushed crawfish's stage? The charged gravity well is like this too. It's used to get the body armor and nothing else. Again, how are you supposed to figure out that this one weapon makes this single specific platform float? X3 is in the same boat as X2. If you know where everything is, it's easy to get. It's just difficult to figure out where everything is without a guide. The armor parts are mostly the same as X2, but with some nice improvements. Except the arm parts, which are still the same as they've always been. Instead of a radar thing, the head parts tell you what collectibles you haven't found on the stage select and on a map screen in the beginning of the stage. That really helps give you a general idea of where everything is, even if it can still be hard to figure out what to do anyway. The body armor also gives you more invincibility time on top of increasing your defense. The leg parts probably have the biggest upgrade from last time, since you can now air dash straight upwards. You have to get used to it though, it's not a straight up double jump, you have to hold it down for a bit. It's a nice addition, it's just that it's not as smooth as the rest of the controls are, although I get why it's like that. In addition to the normal armor system, there's also new enhancement chips to further upgrade your armor parts. They're in pink capsules instead of blue ones, which is very important to know. The body chip further reduces the damage you take, the leg chip gives you another air dash, the head chip restores your health and sub-tanks when you're standing still, and the arm chip is a little more complicated. I think how it works is that when you take damage from projectiles, it charges up a special weapon that lets you fire charge shots instantly. It's kinda weird, but also kinda useful sometimes. You need the base part before you can use this chip, so you need the leg part before you can use the leg chip, for example. The catch for all of this is that you can only use one at a time, so you have to pick which one you like most based on your preference. It's a cool system that completely falls apart in practice. Because what the game doesn't tell you is that if you get all 4 blue capsules, all 8 hard tanks, all 4 sub-tanks, and all 4 right armors, I'll get to that in a bit, and go down this hole in the first Doppler stage with full health, then you get access to the hyper chip, which just gives you all 4 chips at once. So if you know about this, there's no reason to use any of them. Because here's the thing, each one's useful, yeah, but they're not useful enough on their own to make a difference before the Doppler stages. By the time any of these start to make a difference, you can just get all of them. There's an objectively correct choice, which undermines the whole point of only being able to use one at a time. It feels like those people that use all 3 starters in a Pokemon game. Sure, there's a risk versus a reward. You'll either get slightly stronger now or become god tier powerful later, but again, they won't help that much until you can get the hyper chip, so why bother using any of the other chips? Granted, I'm pretty sure this was supposed to be a secret. Like, this is the most playground rumor-ass thing I've ever heard. Up there with jumping off this random ledge in Armor Armadillo multiple times, get a Hadouken that one-shots any enemy in the game. This series gets insane, man. The only reason why I got the hyper chip was because I knew about it. It was one of the few things I didn't know about this game. But when you know that you can do this, there's no reason not to. The only annoying part about the hyper chip is that it also requires you to get all 4 right armors, something that is otherwise useless. Unlike the other games where right armor is just something that you can find in the stages, you have to unlock them in X3. So whenever you find an armor station, you can use any ride modules you found. But first you need to find the Chimera armor and Blast Hornet stage, which also requires you to beat Tunnel Rhino. Then you can use up to 4 different ride armors. The problem with this is that there isn't really much of a difference between them. The standard armor is basically the same as the next one, not much to say there. With the Kangaroo armor, I don't know what the difference is. It seems to jump about the same height. Maybe the punches do more damage? I have no clue. The Hawk armor shoots homing rockets instead of having a punch. Neat. It also has an air hover if you hold down the jump button. Wait a minute, didn't the right armor next do have those spike punches? Because it could also hover in the air. Did they just split that into 2 separate armors? Why? Once you get Kangaroo or Hawk, there's no reason to use the normal armor, and each one of those is just a worse version of what was the next two. The Frog armor at least works underwater, but it sucks on land, so it's just situational. It's used in like 2 places. I don't know what the point of the Chimera armor is. A Ride armor was fine before. They're not even used to get any upgrades, except like 2 heart tanks, but you can use any Ride armor for that. You don't need the specific Ride armors for anything. I think you're supposed to use the Hawk armor to get the head chip, but even then, if you got the leg parts, it's pretty easy to just air dash to it. These armors only used to get chips, which again, you can just get the hyper chip instead. These things just feel like busy work. You really don't need them. The end game this time is a bit of a weird one, because unlike X2, I used a guide the whole time, so I did everything. I killed every member of X Hunters 2 and got the hyper chip and the Z Saber. Yeah, for some reason, if you switch to Zero and kill this unassuming mini-boss as Zero, Zero goes out of commission for the rest of the game, but X gets the Z Saber. A 4th level of Buster Charge that kills every boss in like 2 hits. Keep in mind that this is the only boss in the game that you can even fight as Zero. How are you supposed to find this? Again, I don't know. Because as it turns out, when you have both the Hyper Chip and the Z-Saber, the endgame is a complete joke. You take very little damage, you can refill all your sub-tanks by standing there. Double air dashes really help with the trickier platforming, and the only boss that's kind of hard is the second Sigma phase. And that's only because his hitbox is so small that it's really hard to land the Z-Saber shot. I heard X3 was really hard, but as it turns out, you can make it the easiest X game so far. I'm sure it's much harder without all those extra super upgrades, but I actually kind of liked how much of a power trip it ended up being. For most of the boss rush, I didn't need weapons, I just needed the Z-Saber. Not that I use them that much anyway. The spinning blade was just about the only consistently useful one. Plowing through everything in my path was actually pretty fun. Like, I'm glad I followed a guide this time. This was the ideal X3 experience for me. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the actual ending. Dr. Doppler was actually being mind controlled by Sigma, whose main form is apparently a virus, and he's the one who was behind everything. Damn, that's crazy. X beats him up, Doppler sacrificed himself to save X. We live in a society, to save mankind, he must destroy Zero, the end. Wait, where'd that come from? Am I going insane? They never mentioned this in X3 anywhere. I know this becomes important in X5, but like, this is kind of out of nowhere. What? If you beat the game without Zero dying and without getting the Z-Saber, Zero takes down the Sigma virus instead, so I'm assuming the Zero gets infected unbeknownst to everyone else. That's my best guess. Maybe it was a mistranslation somewhere? I don't know. I've stopped caring. Also, why were there no staff credits? That's so weird bullshit. People worked hard on this. I don't care about what the enemies are called. Who made this, Capcom? I wanna know. They did a great job. At this point, the only thing left to talk about are the ports of these games. Okay, I lied. I said I was going to talk about this during X2, but then I remembered that X3 is a PS1 version for some reason, so better talk about it here. Which, by the way, wasn't released in North America. It was released in Europe and Japan, but not North America. You know, it's pretty funny that it starts off with an anti-piracy PSA, because I literally couldn't play it in English otherwise, at least on PS1. Anyway, I don't like this version of the game. The graphics are untouched, that's fine. But they went and replaced most of the sound effects, and it's not like it was all the original sound effects at a higher quality. No, these are brand new. They just don't have the same impact as the SNES sounds. Just listen to the boss doors closing. The music definitely has it worse. They made new remixes for all the tracks in the game, and they are not faithful at all. Here's Blast Hornet's stage. Where's the guitars? It barely even sounds like the same song. I should mention that I didn't do a full playthrough on PS1. I just kind of played for 20 minutes to see what's what. The same goes for the other versions I'm talking about. And so I looked up the PS1 version of the first Doppler stage, because this goes hard on Super Nintendo. But then you get to the PS1 version, and it sounds like this, and it's just so weird. Did they even listen to the original tracks? The PS1 version also has FMVs for the boss intros, which is cool, but they also forgot to explain the story. There's this whole intro cutscene on a Super Nintendo that tells you what's going on, but on PS1, they just skip straight to the raid on the headquarters of Maverick Hunter. What's happening? Please explain to me what's going on, I'm begging you. The PS1 version is a pretty neat curiosity, but it's the worst version of the game in my opinion. You even have to deal with PS1 load times. It's not a bad way to play the game, but with how easy it is to play the Super Nintendo version, just play that instead. You're not missing much going out of your way for this. Next up, we've got the X collection on PS2 and GameCube. I heard this collection was bad, but I don't know why. The main thing I heard about it was that it had awful input latency, but it doesn't. The input lag is fine. It's about as responsive as you'd expect it to be. And keep in mind that I was playing the GameCube version on an HD TV through 2 rounds of capture card pass-through. This is like the worst case scenario for this kind of thing, and it felt fine to me. The X collection has X1 through 6, including the PS1 version of X3, and they added save data to X1 and X2. I don't personally like that version of X3, but I fail to see how this is a bad collection. They even removed the slowdown in the SNES games and improved the load times in the PS1 games. I also really like how they updated the SNES games logos to be more consistent with the PS1 games on the game select screen. It's a weirdly nice touch. Like, if this was 2006, I would tell you to play this release, because as far as I can tell, it's the best version of these games after that point in one complete package. But this isn't 2006, and you probably shouldn't play it unless you emulate it, because this game did not agree with my TV at all. The signal would randomly cut out constantly, and it even looked like this on my capture card, even though it looked fine on my TV. Other GameCube games using the same setup looked fine, so I don't know what's going on with this game. I'll be honest, this footage does not look good, but it's the best I could do. I'm assuming it's because it's playing the game in 240p mode, which is the same resolution as the original games. But modern TVs don't seem to like that, so this happens. This kind of stuff happens sometimes when you play on a display it wasn't designed for. Stuff like this is why CRT filters exist. That's probably my only real issue with it. It would have been nice if they upscaled the games to 480p. I think Resident Evil 2 did that. If you have a CRT, there's nothing wrong with this collection. If you emulate it, there's nothing wrong with this collection. But realistically speaking, you'll probably be playing the X Legacy Collection. This is the most recent release of the X games. It's just about the best way to play these games, but I played X1 through 3 on BSNES instead, because XLC doesn't have integer scaling for some reason. Like, look at this. You can't usually tell that much, but Mega Man is one of the few games where you absolutely can. The health bar segments are uneven, and it just looks gross. This is the default, and you can't turn it off. Like, you go into the screen settings and... How long has this been here? The game's still on 1.0.0. It never got updated. It's been here this whole time? Are you telling me that I emulated these games instead of using an official release because I was too lazy to check if it had this? I swear I'm going insane. It didn't used to have this. You have to believe me. Now that I'm mentioning this, does anyone actually care that I emulated these games instead? It's the same game in the end of the day. Well, I should be talking about the X Legacy Collection. So, these are the best way to play these games then. It still has the SNES slowdown because it's emulating all the games, but it's not really a big deal. The only thing it's missing is save states. Like, seriously, just do what the first classic Legacy Collection did and give us a single save state if we need it. It kind of adds save data to the SNES games by letting you save a password, but it doesn't save how full your sub tanks are or button mappings, which are really irritating. You also can't use the back triggers in the SNES games for some reason. Surely it can't be that hard, right? I can do it on BSNES, I can do it on SNES 9X, I can do it on Wii U Virtual Console. Why not here? They didn't fix this with the Zero Legacy Collection either. You can change the button mappings in the console's home menu, but you should need to do that on a system level. It's also weird how they didn't include an option to play the PS1 version of X3, even though they have a PS1 emulator in the same collection. Maybe they didn't think enough people would care, but it's still a weird thing to leave out. These issues are fairly minor though. I don't really have much to say about this. Video game's good. Just remember to turn off the Vaseline filter. Like seriously, what's with collections insisting on using screen filters for pixel art games? It always looks bad. No, Capcom, I'm not impressed by your high resolution filter. It just makes it look worse. Anyway, I was planning on using XLC for X4 onwards because of the faster load time, so the fact that I'm an idiot doesn't really change anything past this point. Let's circle back to Mega Man X3. I was surprised by this one. While the moment-to-moment gameplay has been there, done that at this point, the overall package was pretty enjoyable. What can I say? I had a fun time finally getting to this one. I think I liked it more than X2, actually, which is pretty funny. I didn't like the game back when I first played it, so I wasn't looking forward to getting to this. I had a bit of a let's get this over with kind of mentality in the back of my head, but once I sat down and gave it an honest chance, I had a pretty great time. It's kind of a shame that barely anyone talks about X3 because there's a lot of fun to be had here. Although maybe people tend to skip over this one because of how damn good X4 is. Alright, looks like I'm talking about my childhood games again. Mega Man X4 was my first Mega Man game. At least I think it was. It was either this or Battle Network 3. I don't remember which. I played them both around the same time. I'm not totally sure how I even ended up with X4. My one cousin had it and I liked it, so I guess my parents just bought it for me. My uncle that had the Xbox and Jet Set Radio Future also bought me X5 at some point because he knew I liked X4. And you can tell he did his research because he didn't buy me X6. God bless his soul, he was a real one. As a kid, I never got very far in either of them. I beat Web Spider and Easy Glow once each, but that was it. I never even got past the intro stage of Zero because neither me nor my cousin could figure out how to hit him. It's not hard, by the way, it's the intro boss. I was like 5, so it makes sense that I was so god-awful at it, but my cousin had to be like 13 by that point. I don't know how he couldn't figure this out. I didn't actually end up finishing X4 until I was like 14, though. I think I tried playing it a year or two earlier when I found out that the PS3 Slim was fully backwards compatible with PS1, but not PS2. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's because it used the PS2 hardware to play PS2 games and emulated PS1 games. But I can play Nocturne and Bully on this thing just fine, so... what? Anyway, I didn't finish it at 12 or so, mainly because my PS1 disc is kind of broken and all the music sounds like this. X4's music is too good. I ain't playing it like that. So I was pretty excited when it got released on the PlayStation Store, which is when I finally finished the game. And as Zero, no less, whom I couldn't even beat the intro stage with as a kid. Ever since then, X4 has been a game I usually come back to every now and then, usually finishing with both characters. So unlike the other X games, I've already beaten X4 like 10 times. What can I say? I just have fun replaying it. I haven't played it since the X Legacy Collection came out though, so it's been a while. But hey, what's 2 more times? Here's the weird thing about the PS1 trilogy for me. Despite X4 being my first with an asterisk Mega Man game, I actually prefer how the Super Nintendo games feel. I don't know what it is about these games. Something about the character sizes and general game feel just makes it ever so slightly not as good to me. That's not to say PS1 Mega Man X plays bad. Still plays pretty damn good. Just not quite as good as before in subtle ways that I can never truly put into words. Video games. Like, comment, and subscribe. The presentation is definitely better, though. The jump from Super Nintendo to PS1 obviously let them make way more detailed sprites and animations. These games look great. It's wild that this was actually considered outdated when it came out. I get the 3D graphics are all shiny and new, but I just don't understand how you can look at this and think it looks bad. I mean, yeah, hindsight is 2020 and all that. I just never understood the logic. The game looks good. That's the important part. Like, apparently Sony of America rejected the PS1 version twice just because it used 2D graphics. It was a different time. And you know, it's pretty crazy just how little 3D effects it uses. The last 2 games had these wireframe models to show off their fancy graphics chip, and then when given a console capable of doing this natively, they just got rid of 3D effects entirely. Well, except for the boss explosions, but this was seriously the only 3D thing in this game that I noticed. None of this is a bad thing if it wasn't already obvious. I just thought it was pretty interesting that they pushed for an art direction they thought fit the game better instead of trying to chase trends. Although it could have just been because it was apparently developed as a Sega Saturn exclusive of all things. Yeah, there's a Saturn version for some reason. It's nearly identical to PS1 aside from a few minor graphical differences as far as I can tell. All the re-releases are based on the PS1 version anyway, so whatever. Doesn't really matter. As for the actual video game, let's start off with the stages. The stage aesthetics have a lot of variety this time. A jungle with waterfalls and logs they have to wall jump off of. There's a sky battalion, a frozen ice place. Oh hey, it's Blizzard Buffalo. That's a cool touch. I've always loved Cyber Peacock's stage. It's a speed challenge, where in the first part of the stage you get upgrades if you get through them fast enough. The real challenge comes from not touching these orange balls that slow you down. I am incredibly good at doing the exact wrong thing in this situation. You can easily get through with the split mushrooms weapon, but it's a fun idea. The second half is kind of lame though. You just flip the stage and move balls around. They don't do anything interesting with it aside from using the ball to open doors or quickly defeating a few enemies. The split mushroom stage is kind of weird too. It has a few scenes like this where it's just a shifting panoramic staircase. It looks pretty bad compared to the rest of the game. Maybe it's just one of those things that look better on a CRT. Think Donkey Kong Country. You couldn't tell that the sprites were just pre-rendered 3D models because the display had its own inherent form of anti-aliasing. It's hard to show in an HD video like this. Filters can't do it justice. Also, why do these staircases end with a teleporter? They could afford a teleporter, but not a door? Honestly, most of the stages just kind of blend together for me. They're enjoyable, but I've played this game so many times that I can just fly through all of them without any issue. Most don't leave much of an impact on me anymore. Doesn't help that about halfway through each stage, you have a loading screen that refills all your health and ammo. And if you get a game over, you restart at the last loading screen instead of at the beginning of the stage. It was probably to cut back on load times, but you definitely feel the system limitations creeping up on you with the near instant load times on the Legacy Collection. I can appreciate the time save, but all it ends up doing is making live feel pointless. Not that that's a bad thing, it just puts the game on the easier side of the Mega Man X spectrum. X4 is hilariously forgiving. At least it means I don't have to play Jet Stingray's stage any longer than I have to. I don't know what they were thinking with this place. It's a rail shooter on this hover bike, and it's just so irritating. You can barely see 2 feet in front of you, and it comes down to memorization more than anything else. It's pretty short, but it's easily the only stage I outright hate playing. Although it probably wouldn't be as bad if this game was in 16:9 instead of 4:3. A really annoying thing about playing Genesis Sonic for me was the same issue. You go so fast in those games, you often ran into stuff you weren't careful. But since the remasters give you a wider field of view, it wasn't a problem for me anymore. The same principle might apply here, but even then, it would probably still be annoying and stupid and dumb anyway. I just can't do this anymore, man. Get me out of here. I miss Magma Dragoon stage. That was so much more fun. You get to beat up a boss in ride armor. That was awesome. The recommended first stage being in a volcano is pretty nifty. You don't see that too often in games. I really don't like the stage bosses though. A lot of them go into a very easy to dodge pattern when you hit them with their weakness. I feel like I'm starting to sound like a broken record complaining about this, but it's really bad in X4, at least when playing as X. The only boss that doesn't suffer from Spark Mandrill Syndrome is Web Spider, but even then, dude, it's pretty easy with just the Buster when you get the pattern down, so you don't really need his weakness to beat him. Look, if I could beat this guy once when I was 6, I'm sure you can too. Some of the weapons are at least useful, but honestly, the charge shot is so good in this game, I usually forgot about the weapons. The game actually gives you a neat choice. There's 2 arm parts in this game. The normal ones let you store up 4 smaller charge shots. This is the objectively wrong choice because the other one that's slightly hidden gives you a charge shot that pierces through multiple enemies and it hits multiple times with a spark trail thing. I guess the trade-off for the weaker weapons this time is the head parts just straight up give you unlimited weapon energy as long as you don't charge them. This is the most baffling decision I've ever witnessed. I could see it doubling your weapon energy, but giving you infinite? Like, that's too busted. At least it would be if the weapons were better. The lightning web gives you a wall to jump off of, which is really useful, and Twin Slasher shoots 2 shots diagonally in front of you. It's great for awkwardly placed enemies. Everything else sucks though. The Soul Body is this weird replica of you that doesn't do much damage. It seems scientifically engineered to make Cyber Peacock's stage easier and nothing else. Ground Hunter just shoots these stingray shots that go along the ground. These are ground-based enemies, but you're usually better off just shooting them normally. The other weapons are just there. Rising Fire is too situational. Frost Tower is a weird shield thing that's good against like 2 bosses. Double Cyclone is hard to aim, and the aiming laser is a little too awkward on anything that isn't a boss. You get the Nova Strike with the armor parts, but it's only good for 1 use, so it's mostly useless. So yeah, the weapons are just kind of alright in this game. You're usually better off using the Buster, which makes it all the weirder that you not only have infinite weapon ammo with the head parts, but you also have a weapon sub-tank, and your ammo is fully restored on death or a loading screen, so you're absolutely swimming in weapon energy you will never use. That weapon sub-tank is even more baffling since Zero doesn't have weapon energy for his abilities, aside from this one attack, but that refills by doing or taking damage. Speaking of him, I should probably go over how Zero plays. In X3, he was basically just an easy mode for most of the game, but he's a completely separate character now. They saw the Z-Saber that went criminally underused and turned Zero into a melee fighter. Instead of a buster, he has a 3-hit combo and an air slash. Whenever X would get a new weapon, Zero gets a new technique, usually used with the triangle button and holding a direction on the D-pad. Magma Dragoon gives him an upwards air slash as an example. Considering Zero's more limited range, it's actually pretty good for attacking enemies at weird angles. Split Mushroom not only gives Zero a double jump, but also gives you a spinning air slash, which becomes your primary means of attack going forward. It's just that good. But aside from those 2, Zero's weapons are just as meh as X's. I can't think of a single time I'd ever use the ice stabby thing over the regular attack, aside from Jet Stingray, who, by the way, also needs Split Mushroom's double jump in order to hit him with this thing consistently. Otherwise, it seems like you have to wait for him to do his charging attack, which just makes him annoying to fight. But even with the double jump, if you mess up hitting him once, it has this weird domino effect where it becomes hard to get back into the optimal flow of fighting him. Most of Zero's bosses are kinda hard, to be honest. Web Spider gives this electric stab thing, but it has a painfully long startup time, and it can only be used on the ground, meaning you can't hit Split Mushroom with it unless it's during the one specific attack where he's on the ground. It's just irritating considering how easy he is as X. Some bosses also share weaknesses, weirdly enough, like how Peacock and Walrus are both weak to the upwards fire slash. Also, I'm not saying the actual names of these techniques because I can't remember them for the life of me. Ku Enbu? Ryujin something? Like, look at these. You try remembering this. Some bosses are still pretty easy with their weakness. Mainly Cyber Peacock, Storm Owl, Frost Walrus, and Jet Stingray if you do it right. But I'd say about 3 still put up a fight. I didn't die at all during X's boss rush, but I actually died like 3 times during Zero's. So yeah, Zero is basically the hard mode of this game. You'd think that a melee-only character would be an objectively worse way to play jump and shoot man, but there's always been something about Zero's gameplay that feels more satisfying than X. When having such low range, you need to pick and choose when to attack, especially on bosses. Like, when you fight the General as X, you can literally just stand in the corner and spam the twin slasher until he's dead. He can't really do anything to you. But when you fight him as Zero, it's much more tense because of how little opportunity you have to attack him. You have to just pray that he keeps using this lower charge attack instead of going upwards and sending out his rocket fists. Getting into position to attack him, also trying to avoid these energy spheres, isn't easy. Hitting him while he's lower to the ground is pretty doable. It's an extra layer of skill that you don't really see when you can just hug a wall and attack from a distance. This general fight as Zero is probably the only fun part of the ending game, though. It's an easy stage followed by a pretty easy stage, then it's just the boss rush and the final boss. Kinda lame, but I do like how stage 2 is a split path. I've always liked going down the paths as different characters just to spice things up. Honestly, my only big issue with X4 is the final boss. It's kind of overkill. First phase is pretty easy. Use Rising Fire or Upper's Fire Slash on him, and every 3 phases he does this rush thing with his scythe. Like, once you get the pattern down, it's really hard to even get hit by this guy. Phase 2 is much worse just because Sigma's attacks can be pretty hard to dodge. It's mainly these boomerang things that hone in on you. You can't stand on the ground because Sigma's scythe is sending out these shockwaves, but he can't hug the wall either because the boomerangs come after you. As X, I can never figure out how to dodge it consistently. I guess you can just slide down the wall at just the right time, but I couldn't figure it out. This attack is way less problematic as Zero since you can double jump at the right time to get them off you, but I can still take a few tries to get it right. He also has his other attack where he shoots lasers at the floor and electrocutes the opposite wall, but he uses it so infrequently that it catches me off guard more than anything. Also, phases 2 and 3 technically have weaknesses, but I just ended up using the charge shot instead. It often gave me more consistent results, especially with phase 2. The lightning web just ends up getting in the way more often than not. If the boss ended at phase 2, it'd be pretty easy, but the third phase is where they really overdid everything. They at least have the decency to give you a health pickup, but it's not enough. So for this phase, you essentially have to take on 2 bosses at once. There's a giant Sigma head on the ground and a sniper Sigma on the wall that alternates between these color statues attacking you. It's madness how much you have to worry about at once. Each boss only has like 2 attacks that are pretty easy to figure out once you get the hang of it, but it takes so long to get to that point that it makes this whole 3-phase boss a giant endurance test. This is made worse by the fact there's only 2 sub-tanks in this game for some reason. Like, I kinda agree that X4 is easy enough to where you don't quite need 4 sub-tanks, but why the hell do you have a weapon sub-tank in a game where you have an upgrade that gives you unlimited weapon ammo? And even if you did have 3 sub-tanks, you still have to make it count because you can't refill your tanks in between attempts. There was a loading screen right before this fight, so lives don't matter anymore. You can retry the boss as many times as you need to. But the only way to refill your tanks against this thing is to continually die over and over until they're refilled, which takes forever. It's shocking how big of an oversight this is. Why even make the player do this? Why not have a special item that appears only in this room that completely refills your tanks? Oh, but that'd make the game too easy. Then don't use sub-tanks? Sorry that I want to consistently have a fighting chance to beat this guy within a reasonable time frame, in a game that I otherwise never have any issues playing. Skill issue. Yeah, well, you want to know how I end up beating this stupid boss? I just throw myself with a fight and keep fighting him until I eventually win without sub-tanks, or at least a half-filled one, because I wasted my tanks earlier and died right before the finish line. When you keep fighting this dude ad nauseum, you'll win eventually. It's just annoying that I have to do that when the obvious solution to this is to either replace the weapon sub-tank with a health sub-tank, or let you instantly refill them before the fight. I'd also adjust the vacuum attack on the Sigma head, at least when you fight him at Zero. This thing does way too much damage and is so difficult to dodge. There's no way to consistently hit this stupid head as Zero since he'll just blow you away otherwise. I think all he can really do as Zero is to hug the top right corner and not even attempt to attack him, but it's just stupid and wastes your time at that point. Like I said, this boss is doable. Its real issue is how you don't have a way to consistently refill your sub-tanks, because that's kind of the point of them, to make bosses less taxing. Again, I shouldn't have to throw myself at the boss for an hour. It's boring. I'd rather just move on with my life, which at this point is what I also rather do when it comes to talking about it. X1 Sigma ain't got shit on this guy. You know, I just realized I haven't talked about the story yet. Normally I talk about the story in games first, mainly because it's a really easy icebreaker. If you're trying to talk to a friend about a game, it's like, well, what's this thing even about? Mega Man X4 is an interesting case. I could tell you anything about what happens in this game, but you already know what it's famous for.
Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
So why even bother leading with it? X4 is an occasional anime cutscene. The animation's fine. If you watch them on mute, it's about on par for what you expect from 90s anime. But when you listen to the English dub, it's completely butchered. It doesn't matter how good the writing is. If the acting is abysmal, you can't take it seriously. Just think about those Google translated mods that completely obliterate the in-game text. You can make anything sound stupid and hilarious with the wrong word choice or bad delivery. Like in that same infamous scene I just showed, Iris's dying words are talking about how her and Zero should just run away together to a world where Reploids can just live in peace without humans. Zero having a mental breakdown is completely justified. If my cute robot GF died in my arms, I'd question if life was worth living too. Like, for how much X4 is praised for being arguably the best X game in a series where its competition is Mega Man X, it's also constantly made fun of for its atrocious voice acting. I'm not even gonna bother ragging on X4's English dub. It's not just beating a dead horse, it's practically dancing on his ashes. It's so insane to me that X4 came out the same year as Mega Man Legends. The same publisher and same series of video games gave us some of the best voice acting on the PlayStation and some of the worst in the same year. You can easily tell where the voice acting budget went. There's this bizarre disconnect between the text cutscenes and the animated ones, because to someone who's never looked into it, never tried to look at X4's story any deeper than what's presented by this atrocious English dub, the story's pretty bad. But the reality is that X4's story is actually pretty good. It's obviously no Shakespeare, and it's not even that deep, but compared to what came before, it definitely feels more well thought out and better written. So I'm just gonna be talking about the story assuming you watch the Japanese dub with English subtitles. Yeah, I'm being one of those people today. The game starts off with an alert that a group of Mavericks are attacking this Sky Lagoon place, and X/Zero has to go stop them. Let's assume it's X for now. X actually doesn't make it on time. The floating island crashes into the city below. Repliforce, a military group of Reploids, gets blamed for this whole mess because they just happen to be in the area. And because they didn't do it, their colonel refuses to cooperate, so they're labeled as Mavericks, and now they want to create a Reploid-only nation in space. So they have to beat up 8 of their commanders before taking the fight to the space colony. Well, 5 of them. Magma Dragoon, Split Mushroom, and Cyber Peacock are actually working for Sigma. Split Mushroom even says, take a wild guess at who he's working for. Like, you know the drill, you know Sigma's behind everything. Boss's allegiance is actually on their health bar. It's a great touch. It later turns out Magma Dragoon blew up Sky Lagoon just to fight X. Like, I know Sigma showed up and convinced them to do it, but surely Dragoon could have come up with some other way to fight him, right? X is a pacifist, sure, but I don't know, man. It seems a bit odd this dude would agree to kill tons of innocents just to fight one guy. Like, was he having a midlife crisis or something? You can't just go on a murder spree in order to fight the main protagonist. You're not Vegeta. God, what was I even talking about? Oh yeah, the Mavericks. The other 2 Sigma Mavericks are basically just terrorists, but the Repliforce Mavericks don't seem outright evil. Most of them just fight you out of self-defense. Hell, Frost Walrus doesn't even want to fight X because he doesn't want to hurt a kid. Even though Frost Walrus is probably younger than X because all Reploids are based off of X, but whatever. You do end up defeating Repliforce in the end, but it's a pretty hollow victory. Aside from giving their space colony a giant death ray for some reason, they didn't really do anything wrong. Magma Dragoon was a soldier of Repliforce, yeah, but they didn't order him to do that. He chose to destroy Sky Lagoon. Sigma ultimately ends up being behind everything. It's Mega Man X, what did you expect? It really goes to show how evil this guy is. He started a completely pointless war for literally no reason. You know all those monologues X has at the end of every X game? It feels like justified thoughts to have this time. No one had to fight, no one had to die. Repliforce probably could have even had their space colony peacefully if Sigma hadn't stepped in. It's a genuine tragedy. Zero's story plays out basically the same. Zero ends up rescuing the Colonel's sister, Iris, instead of Colonel, and Zero fights Colonel on a cutscene instead of as a mid-boss. Zero also ends up fighting Iris, but I don't know why. In the English version, she sounds sad more than anything. But in the Japanese version, she sounds a lot angrier, like how she told Zero way too many times not to fight Colonel and that it's too late for apologies. You know what, I think this game just had a botched localization in general. So I guess she's angry that Zero killed her brother, even though Zero didn't want to fight him in the first place. He more or less had to. It's a complicated situation, which makes Iris's death so much more tragic. Zero ended up having to kill the person he was trying to protect, so what's even the point in fighting anymore? That's what this scene was trying to say. It also turns out that Zero is not only created by Dr. Wily, but he also used to be Maverick. And it's implied that Zero's initial fight with Sigma is what caused Sigma to go Maverick. So something like 30 to 50 years after his death, Dr. Wily is low-key still the cause of everything wrong with this universe. And so, this game ends on Zero feeling ashamed of not being able to save anyone, while X asks Zero to dispose of him if he ever goes Maverick. A really downer ending no matter who you play as. It's kind of a shame how interesting of a story X4 has. It's pretty simple and not overly deep, but they really did try to do something more than the usual beat-up Sigma kind of narrative. It's just that most people playing the game completely just miss it because of the bad localization. Like, I was talking to a few friends about X4 while editing this video, and they all thought the story was bad. Believe me, I'm forcing them to watch this. You know who you are. But sure, the story probably could have been told better. I didn't really get the full picture until I wrote this review, but I'm glad I did. I'm obviously not playing Mega Man for the story, but because of it, I ended up appreciating X4 more as I got older. I didn't actually finish this game for the first time until I was like 14. And to be fair, I didn't really pay attention to the story the first time I played. You know why. It just makes me wish more people could appreciate this plot. I feel really bad for everyone by the end. No one deserved any of this. None of it had to happen if Sigma stopped being an asshole for 5 minutes. It's all stuff I never thought about until recently. So yeah, Mega Man X4 is not my favorite Mega Man game, but it is my favorite X game. Everything about this game just comes together into an insanely satisfying package. It's more of a return to form for Mega Man X and doesn't experiment much like X2 and X3 did, but it ends up being a lot better as a result. Instead of trying something new, they polished and expanded on what worked. Even coming up with a new playable character that's somehow more fun to play as than Mr. Man himself. But that's mostly stuff you've probably heard before. X4 is considered one of the best games in the franchise for a reason. It kicks ass. I just wish more people could see the whole picture and appreciate the story this time. Obviously the English dub sucks and it's still pretty simple, but it does end up making you feel for all the characters when you really try to enjoy it. Mega Man is one of those games that doesn't need a story. I'm satisfied just playing through it even without any dialogue. But X4 is an example of how much better the experience can be when they try to make a more compelling narrative. Though "we live in a society" monologue at the end actually means something this time. It makes everything that happens have a purpose. Mega Man X is really about the tragedies of war and terrorism at the end of the day. But that message feels forced if you don't do anything with it. X4 does. Even if the English translation is much to be desired. But does Mega Man X continue down this more mature road? I actually don't know. I haven't played X5 since I was 12, and I don't think I even finished it. I watched Let's Plays of all these games back when I was like 15 or 16, but I don't remember the stories of these games at all from here on out. So let's find out together. Mega Man X4 was incredible, an insanely good video game, arguably peak Mega Man X. So naturally, Capcom had no idea how to follow up on it other than try a bunch of weird stuff and see what happens. That's usually how this kind of thing goes. For how beloved the previous game is, the other two games in the PS1 trilogy aren't quite as fondly remembered. For varying reasons. But for right now, we can talk about the actually good one, Mega Man X5. Like I said last time, I had X5 as a kid, but I never got very far in it because I was like 6. It's kind of weird. Despite the game looming over my shoulder for most of my life, I never actually got around to finishing it. But guess we're doing it now. This time on Mega Man X, the Maverick Hunters detected Sigma in a nearby city. He's in this weird statue head for some reason, and destroying the weird statue head causes Sigma virus to go haywire all around the world, infecting tons of Reploids, making everyone go Maverick. That wasn't bad enough. There's this new guy named Dynamo. They don't even bother trying to hide that he's working for Sigma. He wrecked the space colony from the last game, and now he's going to crash into the Earth in 16 hours. Basically, X and Zero have to gather up the 4 parts to repair this giant space lizard to destroy the space colony before it crashes into the planet. And if that doesn't work, they have to gather up 4 parts to repair their only working space shuttle to use it like a bomb and have the pilot eject themselves before they die in a fiery explosion. So yeah, desperate times. All of this extends to the gameplay. The 4 Mavericks on the left side of the stage select have the cannon parts, and the ones on the right have the shuttle parts. Going to a stage makes an hour pass, so you effectively have to beat all 8 stages within 16 hours. You know, in theory, because you can actually just fire the weapon and take the shuttle right now if you wanted to. And you'd think that this wouldn't give you the good ending, so why bother? But that's the thing, man. This is completely random. You can just go into a stage, kill yourself until you get a game over, and try both plans until one works. You can actually get to the good ending without going into a single stage. Even if you get the bad ending, you still go to the end stage without going into any of the main stages. I thought I was able to at least get to the end stages at some point when I was younger, but I guess it turns out I was just bad at video games. But what else is new? It's really cool that he can do this, and also really funny. X and Zero are just like, you know what? Screw it, we ball. And then most of the world gets wiped out, and it's like, well, we did everything we could. However, the opposite is also true. For some insane reason, if you beat all 8 stages, you're not actually guaranteed to get the good ending. I don't know what the exact odds are. It is unlikely. I got the shuttle to work in both playthroughs I did for this video, but it's apparently likely enough to where it can actually reasonably happen. Some people would consider this a life lesson. The world sucks. You can do everything right and still fail. There isn't anything anyone can do about that. However, I would consider this bad game design. Like, dude, I got all 8 parts, beat all 8 stages. What more do you want from me? This is just stupid. Luckily, the stages in this game are pretty decent. Mostly. But before I talk about the stages, I need to explain the boss names. If you're playing the game on X Legacy Collection 2, the Mavericks follow the usual naming scheme as before. You know, adjective animal, crescent grizzly, tidal whale, vault kraken, etc. But one person on the localization team thought, hey, my husband likes Guns N' Roses. What if I named all the Mavericks after Guns N' Roses members? Now, why did Allison Court, the voice of Claire Redfield in Resident Evil 2, decide to do this? I don't know. But maybe she was onto something. Considering this series is called Goddamn Rockman, and how most characters in the classic games are named after musical terms, I'm shocked something like this only happened once. Like seriously, Axel the Red, the Skyver, Dark Dizzy, Izzy Glow, Grizzly Slash, Duff McWhalen. These names just sound awesome. So while the Legacy Collection names are technically more official, I'm using the Guns N' Roses names because they're objectively better and you can't convince me otherwise. Anyway, Squid Adler's stage sucks. For more than just that. You remember that stupid speed bike stage from X4? Yeah, well, what if we made that again, but worse? Before, you could at least get through the stage just fine if you were trying to get all the upgrades. But here, you pretty much have to know exactly when you're supposed to shoot and when you're supposed to dash to destroy these pillar things. Even after getting through this a few times, I still have trouble finishing this consistently. In my second playthrough, I figured out that you can mash both the square and triangle buttons to shoot faster, which helped, but it's still annoying and stupid. The real problem comes when you're trying to get the armor part. There's these little spark balls scattered around like collectibles, so in order to get the armor part, you need to get all 8 of them before you get to the second part of the stage. These things are in the most annoying spots possible too. This stage gimmick that is already stupid requires so much precision to actually get through. This part took me like 45 minutes to finish with all the spark balls collected. It was not fun. The second half of the stage is much better, but still annoying. There's these gates that only open by shooting these electric swishes a bunch of times. Something totally doable, but not very fun. They start to be a real problem when you have to open 2 gates at the same time. The gates only stay open temporarily, so you have to balance going back and forth between them. Again, it's doable, just annoying. Especially when you're coming in here with a guy armor to get the hard tank and your attack range is way lower. Trust me, I will probably complain about this later. At least Squid Adler is the only stage I outright disliked. Duff McWhalen's stage is boring because it's an auto-scroller where there's this submarine that's chasing you. But compared to what I just went through, I will gladly take boring over frustrating. Honestly, I think the only stage I can say that I actively liked was Grizzly Slash. For most of the stage, you're jumping from truck to truck and destroying them. It's actually a pretty fun and memorable set piece. That's all the stage really is. Not that that's a bad thing. All the other stages are just kind of there. There isn't really anything that sticks out, but I didn't mind playing them either. Like, I don't know what's going on in Axel's stage. It's over in like 2 minutes. There's nothing here other than some ropes to hang from, which is used in other stages anyway. I don't know what else to say about this place. Thanks for coming to the dense forest, I guess. I actually really like the part in Matrix's stage where you have to avoid the rushing lava by going into the safe zones. It sounds stupid, but they give you so much time to move in between each rush of lava that it's actually a really cool segment. Dark Dizzy's stage is just weird. It has this black hole in the background that makes everything run at half speed and then spawns some bats that are kind of annoying, mainly because of the ones that drop insta-kill death spikes. I don't like those guys. The bats that don't drop spikes can just be ignored, so I have to question what the point of it is. And then the second half has this thing that flips the stage upside down, a mechanic that you can completely ignore if you don't care about the heart tank. This stage sounds cool on paper, but the thing that makes it so weird is the execution. It just ends up having a bunch of mechanics you can mostly ignore. All the stage really throws you is this lift that you have to stay on. And even then, it's only made somewhat difficult by the spikes that can come out of nowhere and take up like half the space of this small platform that you have to stay on in order to not die. The Skyver stage is fine. The only thing of note here is that all these injured Reploids give you a pretty decent way to fill up your sub-tanks. Izzy Glow's stage is definitely the least memorable. It's mainly just a hallway with nothing interesting going on. Also, the CGI stairs from X4 are back, but somehow worse. I don't know what they were thinking with this perspective. That's the weird part about these stages. stages. I would say that I quote-unquote enjoy most of them, but there isn't much that really sticks out either. It's just one of those casual, this is indeed an enjoyable video game kind of things. I at least appreciate that the stages have less loading screens. In X4, they're always consistently split in half by a loading screen, but in X5, that happened maybe like 2 or 3 times. You'd think this means that there's less restart points, so lives actually mean something again. But no, for some reason, when you get a game over on X5, you just restart at the last checkpoint instead of at the beginning of the stage. So unless you choose to go back to the stage select on the game over screen, lives are completely worthless. On the one hand, I don't know why they did this, but on the other hand, you essentially have infinite lives, which 1000% okay in my book. Like I said last time, lives are stupid. I just don't understand why they're still here if they don't actually mean anything. Although what I definitely don't understand the purpose of is Aelia. She constantly interrupts you as you're playing through stages. I don't mind it at the beginning of the stage, it feels like she's giving you a mission debriefing. But when she makes you stop and listen to a bunch of useless information that you can easily figure out by playing the game normally, it's just irritating. You can mash through the dialogue all you want, but you still have to stop what you're doing. This feels like an actual interruption of the game flow. It's completely unnecessary. I don't even mind this as an accessibility feature, just let me turn it off. The Zelda games get flack for stuff like this, but at least Navi and Fi didn't interrupt you every 30 seconds like Aelia does. It's just like, please stop talking. The stage bosses are at least something that I could praise, but also not really. I like how they seem to have more attacks and are generally much more involved fights than just spamming their weakness weapon. Like Grizzly Slash digs holes all over the place so you can't just hit him constantly. Or how Dark Dizzy sends out all these bats that get in the way of hitting him. I really liked how Duff McWhalen shoots out these ice blocks that turn into an obstacle course that you have to go through in order to attack the guy. That's cool. Except during the second phase where they can push you into a pit of spikes. What an asshole. The Skyver also takes place outside on an airship, so he can actually knock you off the ship and kill you instantly. What an asshole. So while these bosses have more attacks and feel more fleshed out, the issue with them is that you can completely ignore their weaknesses. The Charge Shot and Z-Saber are so good in this game that you don't need your special weapons at all. There's a few that definitely have their patterns reset when hit with their weakness, but it's not like they're all that difficult to begin with. You might as well just ignore whatever they give you for beating them, because the weapons in this game are totally worthless. Your regular attack is so damn good that you might as well just use that. This strange boss design is nothing compared to how convoluted the item collection is. In previous games, you did have to backtrack to stages if you want to get everything, yeah, but it was never this bad. I'll only put it this way, even if you do everything right and take the bare minimum route through the game, you still need to revisit every stage at least once. Sometimes more than once. I'm not sure what the exact specifics of that would be, but odds are you need to revisit at least 6 out of the 8 stages, which is just absurd. This is mainly from there being multiple armors in this game. If you start the game with X, you get the 4th armor as soon as the game starts. It's the same as the armor in X4, but without the Giga Attack or the unlimited weapon ammo. So keep in mind that when you're going out of your way for the extra 2 armor sets, you already have the better charge shot, chargeable weapons, and better defense. So it's questionable if you even need them in the first place, aside from getting a few extra heart tanks. The Falcon armor lets you do this controllable air dash by jumping again in the air, which essentially means you can jump super far in this game. The Falcon armor is definitely the better of the two because it completely trivializes the platforming. The Gaia armor is pretty much useless. Basically, your dashes are slower, but they have a bit of an attack radius around them, and you're just straight up immune to spikes, but your buster shots have less range and you can't use special weapons. It's supposed to be a more defensive armor set, but in a game that's generally pretty easy with the other armors, it's just severely outclassed by what you have at the beginning of the game. The Gaia armor is used to get like 3 heart tanks. That's its purpose. Being immune to spikes isn't very useful when the other armor just lets you fly over them. The Falcon armor's air dash is just generally more versatile anyway. You can use it to avoid attacks, avoid platforming, or even save yourself from a pit. The Falcon armor is just objectively better than the Gaia armor in every conceivable way. There's no reason to actually go out of your way for Gaia. Well, aside from missing out on 2 or 3 heart tanks, but it's not as big of a deal as you'd think it would be. Now, I've only told you about the rewards. How you actually get this stuff is the real problem. In order to use an armor set, you need to find all 4 armor parts. It's not like the previous games where each one gives you a new ability. It's all or nothing. So in order to get the Gaia armor, 3 of those capsules require the Falcon armor, which in and of itself requires you to go to 4 separate stages. So let's look at Squid Adler stage. You not only have to do the bike section while also collecting all the sparks to get the Falcon armor piece, you also have to replay the whole stage on what's essentially a higher difficulty with the Gaia armor to get the heart tank. The gate switches were already annoying enough with a regular buster. Now you want me to do it with less range? Come on. Grizzly Slash is like this too. There's a Falcon armor piece near the end of the stage, and you have to come back later with the Guy armor to get the heart tank. Duff McWhalen's stage is probably the worst offender for backtracking. In order to get the Falcon armor part, you need to beat the stage to get the weapon. And then, in order to get the heart tank, you need the Falcon armor. So you need to do this stupid auto-scrolling level a bare minimum of 3 times. I'd probably be less annoyed about this stage if it wasn't an auto-scroller. It just tests your patience for no reason. Why can't I just move ahead of the sub? It's so irritating. At least you only have to replay the first half of the stage, but like, this is a bit much, don't you think? Axel's stage is probably the least annoying about this kind of thing, because while you do need the Falcon armor to get the Guy armor part, at least when you need to use the Guy armor is right at the beginning of the stage. It's even a completely different segment of level that you completely miss otherwise. I really wish we had more segments like this instead of just plopping a heart tank over a pit of spikes for no reason. I think the only stage where I could have gotten everything on my first trip was Izzy Glow. I mean, sure, I doubt I was playing the game in the most efficient way, but it's pretty obvious you need to go to most stages multiple times to get everything. It's just unnecessary. And keep in mind, this game has a limit for the amount of stages you can go to if you want the best ending, so you're basically forced to save all of this stuff until after you've beaten all 8 stages. You're completely screwed out of the better ending otherwise. Luckily, you do get the option to increase your health and weapon ammo whenever you beat a stage, so missing heart tanks during the main game isn't as annoying as it sounds. I just didn't really feel the need to go out of my way for most of this stuff, especially considering how good enough the 4th armor is, but it really bogged down the game's pacing when I spent an hour getting everything. It's definitely not as bad as I'm making it sound. I didn't mind getting all this stuff just to see what it's like, but it's still not really worth it. The next time I play this game, I'll probably just skip getting the Guy armor since it just gives you 3 extra heart tanks that you really don't need. The 2 sub-tanks you can get are more than enough. And weirdly, all the sub-tanks are basically impossible to miss, even the useless weapon and 1-up tanks. Although this definitely makes me appreciate how X4 got the backtracking down to a science. It was pretty minimal in that game. Hell, when you were playing as Zero, you didn't need to backtrack at all when you went in weakness order. Now that we've finally collected all the upgrades, it's time to head to the end stages. At least assuming you got the good ending already. In the bad ending, Zero merges with the Sigma virus and goes Maverick, so you can't play as him anymore. In X5, you can actually choose to play as either X or Zero on a stage-by-stage basis. But through the will of some 5th dimensional being, the heart tanks you collect aren't shared between both characters. This was X's health bar at the end of the game for me, and this was Zero's health bar. Yeah. I shouldn't need to explain why this is stupid. And because you can still get the bad ending even with all 8 stages beaten, there is a real chance that you invest all your resources into Zero because you like playing as him, and then the game pranks you and takes away your ability to play as him. I don't understand how this game makes so many weird decisions. But assuming the random number generator likes you, you can still play as Zero in the end stages, which means you'll get the good ending. While the main stages of X5 are pretty easy, the first end stage is actually pretty hard, and it's mainly because they brought back the Quick Man lasers for some reason. Dark Dizzy even gives you the ability to stop time with Darkhold, just like you could with Flashman. So it's a very annoying level. I don't know what it is about this place, it's just this weird layout that makes the lasers hard to see coming. You also need to make sure you don't touch any walls, because sliding down them instead of just falling will definitely kill you. And because there's a delay on using Darkhold, you have to use it in advance if you actually want to take advantage of it. It also doesn't last long enough for the whole section, so you have to use the weapon sub-tank at just the right time. Granted, all of this is just a skip like 3/4 of the level, but this place doesn't feel like Quick Man stage. Playing the stage without Darkhold is just irritating. But just when you think this stupid stage is over, they brought back the Yellow Devil for some reason. To be fair, the Shadow Devil isn't nearly as hard as the Battle Classic, but it's still probably the hardest boss in the game, which is just... what? This is only the first end stage. They went kinda overboard. It's really telling when the second phase of the Shadow Devil is much easier than the first. Making a harder portion of this fight without making it impossible is such a Herculean task that they didn't even attempt it. I really have to respect that. The other end stages are shockingly easy though. You can even outright skip most of stage 2 if you bring in the Falcon armor. Playing as Zero forces you to actually play the stage, and it is kind of annoying because of all the enemies, but it's definitely nowhere near as hard as the first stage. The other 2 stages might as well not exist, just a few random assortments of platforms and spikes mostly. Which is what game design is when you really stop to think about it, but whatever. Point is, I barely remember the last 2 stages despite playing this game twice. They're very basic and easy. You know, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm complaining about how easy X5 is too much. Okay, well, that is what I've been doing, but I didn't really mind it. Mega Man is known for being challenging, but it's actually kind of refreshing having one that's a lot more lenient, especially an X game, because the core gameplay is just inherently more fun to me than the classic games. With X5 specifically, I'm honestly pretty glad the game's easy, because if it was hard on top of having this overly convoluted good ending requirement, while also needing to play stages multiple times to get everything, it would have been really frustrating to play through. But X5 isn't like that. It's easy, but fun, despite the obvious flaws and weird game design. And that is way better than being frustrating. There are a few ways to make the game harder. Like, there was actually a difficulty select this time, with an extreme difficulty. I think it just adds a few more enemies, gives the bosses more health, and removes a few heart tanks from the game. Which definitely sounds harder to me. You can also just go straight to the end stage with no upgrades or weapons. It's the definition of pain and suffering, but there's bound to be someone out there who thinks this sounds like a good time. Not that I really care, I enjoy the normal difficulty, especially near the end. Because if you go through the first part of the third stage without any armor equipped and go through this fake wall, you get the ultimate armor, which is exactly the same as the fourth armor, except you can use the Giga attack an unlimited number of times. From this point on, the game just becomes a total cakewalk. You don't even need to worry about boss weaknesses. Just press R2 until you win. Unless you're fighting Duff and he throws you into spikes at full health. Again, what an asshole. Or maybe Skyra throws you off the stage at full health. Again, what an asshole. But otherwise, the ultimate armor is a total power trip. It really reminds me of what they did with the gold armor and the Z-Saber in X3. Like, this feels like a cheat code. Because it was. In X4, you can input a code on the character select screen, and you get this when you get your first armor piece. You can even do this in X5 and X6. It's just cool that they give you a way to legitimately obtain this in-game. Zero gets the black armor, which was just cosmetic in X4, but increased your attack and defense in X5 onwards. Not nearly as good as what X gets, but still helpful. You know, I never did talk about how Zero plays in X5. Like I said before, you can switch characters on a stage-to-stage basis this time. I guess the idea was that since they're in a race against time, X and Zero split up to take down the Mavericks. But an hour passes whether you alternate between characters or not, so it doesn't actually matter who you choose. And since the health upgrades aren't shared between characters, you might as well play as one character the whole game. Each character gets a bonus for starting as them at the beginning of the game, but it's a pretty easy decision anyway. When you start the game as X, you get the fourth armor and all the benefits that come with it. But if you start as Zero, you get the Z-Buster, a ranged attack for Zero that can't be charged, can't be used while moving, and has a wind-up, so you actually have to time the attack to get anywhere with it. Basically, it's not worth using. The only reason why you'd ever choose Zero at the beginning of the game is if you decide to play as them for the whole game. The fourth armor is just objectively better otherwise. Despite Zero not getting an overly useful bonus for his playthrough, he was actually easier than my X playthrough, which was definitely not what I was expecting. The bosses have the same problem as X. Your regular attack does so much damage that using your other weapons isn't worth it. Zero's weapons work mostly the same way as an X4, but you don't need to press triangle anymore to use them. Your upwards attack can just be used with up and attack. The weapons have terrible descriptions though. They don't actually tell you how to use them. You have to look in the pause menu and just guess how you're supposed to use them. Like, how does the C-Sword give me a double jump? Oh, okay, it's the air slash upgrade too. That's why it's called a sword. I guess that you're less likely to figure out that this gives you a double jump, but it's weird. Just tell me what this stuff does, you know? Zero in this game isn't quite as noteworthy as the last game, so I didn't think to bring it up until now. In X4, Zero was a totally different experience and worth a second playthrough. But in X5, it just feels like the same game but with a different weapon. That's not to say that a second playthrough of Zero is a waste of time. I enjoyed playing as him, but it didn't feel like a necessary part of the experience. You're not really missing much by not playing as him. It probably comes down to the game design, really. X5 just isn't as well put together as X4 is. But I'm sure he figured that out by now. X5 in general just feels like a lesser version of X4. They even toned down the final boss significantly. It's a fun fight that took quite a few tries, but once you get it down, it's pretty straightforward. It took me maybe like 20 tries as X, but only 2 as Zero. I didn't even need to use both sub-tanks. I mean, it's definitely better than X4's final boss, but it's less memorable, I guess. The story was especially a downgrade from X4. It barely means anything. Okay, so assuming the world doesn't explode from the bad ending, X is worried about Zero about the third stage because the Sigma virus makes him stronger for whatever reason. That actually extends to gameplay. If X takes enough of the virus, you instantly die. But if Zero takes enough of the virus, he becomes invincible for a bit. It's a cool idea, but there's not usually enough of the virus to actually affect you. It's another mechanic that you can usually just ignore. There's also a stronger version of the Sigma virus called the Zero virus, which Zero is still immune to. X wants Zero to take a step back and get checked out, but Zero's like, no way, dude, it's go time, let's kick Sigma's ass. So they beat each other up. Like, don't get me wrong, getting to fight the other playable character is awesome. It even has this cool thematic element where it's like this final battle between Dr. Light and Dr. Wily. A detail that went completely over my head because I was too busy mashing the R2 button. I just don't understand why they have to fight. Why can't they just talk it out like adults, or at the very least have X be like, okay, fine, let's kick Sigma's ass together. Why have them fight each other? It doesn't change the plot at all. I don't know, it feels like one of those things that's totally sick gameplay-wise, but they couldn't figure out a good reason to make it work story-wise. At least in the bad ending, Zero's overtaken by the Sigma virus, so X has to keep his promise to take down Zero if he ever went Maverick. Feels a bit more impactful there. As for Sigma's plan, it was also kind of stupid. He mainly did all this to make Zero stronger just so that Sigma could fight Zero, but he's also satisfied fighting X instead, I think? Look, this whole situation started because Sigma started seeing Dr. Wily in his dreams. Do you really think I know how to rationalize crazy? The ending's weird too. Despite the fact that Zero stood up for X 10 minutes ago, he's now cut in half and lying on the ground for some reason. Sigma shoots Zero out of X's arms, but a single shot from Zero finishes off Sigma and Zero dies for the second time. While X sits in a canyon, cut in half by a single Sigma blast, the Dr. Light AI patches him up and he's fine. Although I love how X takes Zero's saber to remember him by. It's a way for them to still fight together even though Zero can't be there for him anymore. Zero's ending is basically the same, but seeing Zero's final thoughts is pretty cool. It's really sweet that he's still thinking of Iris after all this. And also really funny that she is literally never mentioned a single time in Mega Man Zero. The bad ending is even weirder though, because it cuts to X lying almost dead in the canyon, but Dr. Light deletes all his memories of Zero for some reason. Like what, you decide all his memories of Zero are painful just because he goes crazy at the end? What kind of rationale is that? I kind of do wish I had more to say about this game's story, but that's all there really is this time. X5 was infamously intended to be the last Mega Man X game before Capcom came in and made 3 more, so I'm kind of surprised this game has such a nothing ending. Nothing feels final or climactic, and it feels like they just made things up as they went along. Things I wouldn't really mind, but when the previous game tried so hard to have a more compelling narrative, it just leaves you with an empty feeling. This story never screams, this is the final Mega Man X game. Sigma even alludes to whom I assume is one of the antagonists of X6. He could have been talking about Dr. Wily, but his wording is so vague that I can't really tell. It could be interpreted either way. Honestly, the only interesting part about this plot is that it shows X and Zero are both very ironic characters. X shows no mercy to his opponents, regardless of whether they're friend or foe. He's a perfect killing machine, yet he's a pacifist. He only fights to protect others. If he had his way, we'd have world peace last week. Meanwhile, Zero was created to destroy the world, but when given free will, he chose to protect it. He's even got all this weird shit inside of him to make him stronger on the cost of his humanity, but he doesn't care. He'd rather sacrifice himself to save his friends. Like seriously, Dr. Light and Dr. Wily are lifelong rivals all the way to the bitter end, and their magnum opuses are best friends. It really makes me wish they did more of these characters in this setting. They have an inherently interesting dynamic. Honestly, despite how much I've complained about X5, I still had fun with it. X5 makes so many weird decisions. Like, so weird, man. It boggles my mind why they chose to design the game this way. It almost feels like it was made by aliens at times. Like, why would the heart tanks not be shared between both characters? In what universe does that make any sense? But in spite of it all, the end result is still a pretty good time. While it's probably the weakest X game so far and just a worse X4 at best, a subpar Mega Man X game is still pretty solid. X5 feels like the lovable weirdo of the family. They don't always do things that make sense, but hey, they're still a decent person and they're fun to hang out with. Besides, do you really want to hang out with X6 instead? God, anyone who says X5 is a bad game hasn't played a bad game in their life. Like, go play X6 and X7 and tell me how bad X5 is. Guess what I gotta do next? Mega Man X5 may have been a game that made a lot of weird decisions, but X6 decided to make even weirder decisions, like being bad. So the story goes that X5 was supposed to be the last X game, then Inafune was going to start work on Mega Man Zero. But then Capcom went and made X6 anyway. To mixed results. Critics view the game a bit more positively than fans, who typically treat this game like an affront to God, which I suppose is fair enough. Now, some people like the game, and good for them, I guess. But Mega Man X6 was definitely not a game that I was looking forward to subjecting myself to. I don't really feel they need to build up to this too much. X6 is pretty infamous for a reason. You probably already heard the war stories people have had with this game, so here's my own personal experience playing Mega Man X6. I'm gonna get the story out of the way first, because this game barely has one. It's been 3 weeks since X5, and in the aftermath of the space colony falling, there's this guy named Hymax investigating the Zero Nightmare. Basically, he gives Reploids weird dreams and causes them to malfunction, I guess. They don't elaborate on this at all. I ended up completely forgetting about it until I went back and rewatched the cutscenes to write this. It actually revealed pretty early on that the nightmare is supposed to be a way to control all Reploids, because there's this guy named Gate that wants to create a Reploid-only country where he's in charge and controls everyone. Sure, why not? You do you, man. Also, he used to be a colleague of Alia, but they don't go into their relationship at all and do nothing with this, so it's barely even worth mentioning. Anyway, X kicks Gate's ass as you'd expect, but oops, he revives Sigma, so now I gotta go fight Sigma again. And how can he even take him seriously? What his dialogue portrait is this? It was in the last game too, and I'm so glad they brought this back. I wanted to laugh at this so badly last time, but I could not figure out how to bring it up. Anyway, X kicks Sigma's ass as you'd expect, and the day is saved. Let's work together to build a utopia where Reploids and humans can live together in harmony. They don't. Oh, and Zero was there too. Yeah, Zero's alive again. If you fight an optional Nightmare Zero boss in this teleporter thing in one of the stages, Zero just unceremoniously comes back to life. How is he alive? Well, he hit himself while he tried to repair himself. Okay. Like, is it believable that Zero can repair himself within the 3 weeks between games? Yes. Is it a stupid and contrived excuse to bring him back so quickly? Also yes. And I would feel mad about how it makes Zero's non-sacrifice less impactful, but him dying to Sigma so easily after beating him multiple times was kinda stupid anyway. This outcome is somehow more plausible. Although, speaking of optional bosses, if you go to another teleporter in a stage, I forget which one, you can fight Hymax, and if you beat him, you can unlock the end stages early. I liked being able to do that in the last game, so it's cool to see that come back. Dynamo is another boss you can fight like this, and if you fight him as Zero, he's like, you must be too busy dying so many times. Like, my guy knew he couldn't kill Zero in combat, so he killed him with words instead. Zero's ending even has to rewrite what they were originally planning. Instead of Zero just being dead, this ending has a scientist put him into a stasis pod for 102 years. Why does he do this? I don't know, and honestly, I don't think anyone cares. Play Mega Man Zero. It's not just the bad writing either, this game also has a bad localization, and not even in the usual this is poorly translated if you really look into it kind of way. We're talking typos and weird phrasing everywhere. I wasn't even trying to be annoying about looking for this stuff, and I was noticing typos in the first 10 minutes. Like, even the save menu misspells overwrite. Like, I know a lot of localizations back then just had the localizers translate all the text in a spreadsheet with no context, but it's pretty absurd that stuff like this still made it through quality assurance. This game came out in English in 2001. This is far past the NES kind of bad localization. You can't fix bad writing when translating it to English, but with how little text this game has, it's kind of impressive how many typos there are. Battle Network 4 had a pretty bad localization with plenty of typos, but at least that was an RPG with a lot of dialogue. X6 has maybe 15 minutes of cutscenes. Because of all that, it's so weird to me that this is the first X game that's fully voiced in Japanese. There's no bad dubbing to make fun of this time. Like, they put so much effort into the storytelling, even having a lot of unique portraits and artwork, but the extra effort just feels kind of wasted. I didn't really care about what was going on because of how pointless the plot feels. There's nothing of any real value here, and it just makes the Japanese voice acting in English feel more awkward than it already is. People who watch subbed anime are the minority. It's just off-putting to normal people. I get that there wasn't a budget for an English dub, and that's probably a blessing in disguise, but at least let me turn off the voice acting. Again, it's just weird when I play an English game with Japanese voices instead of English ones. Alright, we're done with whatever the plot was supposed to be, so let's talk about the game itself now. X6 actually does make a few good improvements, like how alias hints are optional now. You can click the right stick when you see an exclamation in the corner of the screen to view them. I'm assuming it was select in the original. Thank God they did this, because her advice is just as useless as before. Oh my god, X! Move right! The one at the beginning of Blaze Heat Nix is so funny because it's literally just X being like, I think the obvious green spots are the mini-boss's weak points. Yes, thank you for pointing out how water is wet. Like, this information is so obvious to anyone with a functioning brain that I have to wonder why they even bothered writing most of these. You also start out with the Falcon armor from the last game, but it doesn't have the completely broken air dash from before and just has the regular air dash. Apparently it's because there was damage in the fight with Sigma and X5 and Alia didn't have time to fully repair it. I think it's a similar situation with the fourth armor in X5. It's a replica, which is why it wasn't as good as it is in X4. Like, there's a pretty neat explanation to tie it into the gameplay. I don't know why X isn't keeping these armors and just using them, but it's probably the same reason why Samus doesn't keep most of her abilities. Video games, I guess. X did keep the Z-Saber from the good ending of the last game, though, and it's a lot more useful than you'd expect. You use it with a triangle button when you don't have a weapon selected. It's great for more awkwardly placed enemies, and you can swing this thing really fast when you use it in the air. X's main attack is still the Buster, but having this as an option does add some good variety to his regular popular moveset. Zero is still the better melee character, but he also has the Z-Buster to give him some kind of range attack. This has a really nice balance between the two characters. X is the ranged attacker with a melee option, and Zero is the melee attacker with a ranged option. Zero is also apparently extremely busted in this game and shreds health bars like crazy. I say apparently because I did not do a second playthrough of Zero. You do have to unlock him first, but if you know what you're doing, you can get him almost immediately. So it's not a real problem if you want to play as him. But I mainly only did one playthrough because I wasn't enjoying myself the first time. Why go through this nonsense again? So let's get into the real issue with this game, the level design. In X5, there weren't really any stages that stood out to me, but I was at least enjoying going through them. In X6, I didn't like any of the stages, and I straight up didn't enjoy most of them. Let's start with Commander Yammerk. Wait, what the hell is a Yammerk? A dragonfly? Sure, whatever. This is probably one of the better stages because the worst I can say about it is that it's forgettable. It's a bunch of platforms and a few spikes here and there. The stage doesn't have any interesting gimmicks or mechanics. There are these turtle things that work as platforms, but that's about it. It's pretty standard level design otherwise. Ground Scaravage is pretty similar. Aside from these dumb totem hole enemies they have to kill, there isn't really anything interesting going on here. Just go through a hall of enemies and destroy these generator things. Blaze Heatnix's stage is so funny. I hope you like this mini boss because you're gonna fight it multiple times and that's the whole stage. Okay, in all fairness, there is a brief section where you dodge flamethrowers. Like, seriously, was fighting the exact same boss this many times really necessary? It's not even a fun boss. Hitting its weak points is annoying. You almost have to rely on your Giga attacks. You fight this thing so many times that you forget how jank it is by the end. Also, this music goes way too hard for what you're doing in it. Like, guys, I'm just fighting a red donut. Rainy Turtleoid has acid rain emitters that you have to kill by destroying its shield protectors, I guess. While it's raining, you constantly lose health, which isn't as annoying as it sounds. Like, with how much people complain about this stage, I expected it to be way worse than what it is. Your health doesn't drain fast enough for it to be a problem, and they give you so many healing stations that the stage actually ends up being pretty easy. Ice Wolf Fang is a different story. This place sucks. There's ice physics everywhere. You have to deal with these falling ice blocks that crush you on top of that. I'm so glad this game essentially has infinite lives, or else some of this stuff would be totally unbearable. Yeah, just like X5, when you get a game over, you restart at the last checkpoint. So if not for that, I would have been tearing my hair out on this level. It's just irritating. Metal Shark Player's stage should bother me more than it does. It takes place in this junkyard with a giant crusher you have to avoid for the whole stage. That's fine in concept, but it makes the stage really slow to go through as you wait for your chance to move forward. The hitboxes on this thing are also really finicky and you have to crouch to avoid being crushed a lot of the time. You end up dying a lot because of how awkward it feels, which makes you replay the same sections over and over. But while it is annoying, it's also something that you can get used to. It's not quite that bad. Shield Sheldon's stage is actually a really cool idea. You have to move all these mirrors to guide lasers toward doors to open them. But when I first played it, I came in with a U-Buster equipped. Sometimes when you save reploys and stages, you get special parts that you can equip in the stage select menu. But none of the parts have descriptions, so I have no idea what most of these do. I assumed U-Buster meant Up-Buster, which sounded like it increased your attack power, but it actually makes it so that you always shoot charge shots. You could imagine not having a rapid fire attack for this stage would make changing the mirrors very annoying, because it was. Although, that's on me, this stage is actually pretty cool when you can use rapid fire. Alright, I lied. I liked one stage. And speaking of the parts, I didn't really touch them that much. I love the one that increased your movement speed, but that was the only major change I could really find from the ones that I equipped. Most parts aren't that useful as far as I know, because, again, they don't have descriptions. And then we get to Infinity Maginian. Okay, the Maverick names in this game are weird, but now you're just making up words. Anyway, Infinity Maginian is probably the weirdest stage. There's this giant robot in the background that shoots lasers at you while you avoid a few hazards and fight too many bosses. It's this really cool and memorable set piece, but that's all the stage is, and it's over in like 2 minutes. It has the same problem as Blaze Heatnix, where it feels like nothing happens just because you're doing the same thing for the whole stage. Infinity Maginian himself is also way too strong. After you hit him with a big attack, he makes a clone of himself. You know, hence the Infinity part of his name. This makes the fight get out of hand real quick. I just couldn't figure out a way to deal with this guy. He's technically weak to the shield thing, but it barely does anything to him. I think you're supposed to reflect shots back at him, but it doesn't even work on most of his attacks. The weapon is so worthless that he may as well not have a weakness. Like, seriously, why even have this weapon weakness system if you have a boss that's barely even affected by it? Shield Sheldon's kind of annoying too, mainly just because he can only be attacked at certain points, and his weakness doesn't do that much damage to him. It makes fighting him a real pain. Wait a minute, did I just write down Shield Sheldon? I meant Rainy Turtleoid. Oh my, these Maverick names are so stupid. But the fun is only beginning, because each stage also has nightmare effects. When you beat a stage, a certain nightmare effect starts happening in stages. Although the only one I ever ran into was the one that blacks out most of the screen. And also, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I also got hit by the one that just shoots fireballs all over the place. That one was annoying too. Because what stages are affected by nightmares are random. And because going back to the stage select re-rolls what stages are affected by nightmares, you can just keep resetting until the stage isn't red anymore. The idea of this is kind of interesting. Do you risk going into a harder version of the stage? But in practice, there's no reason to go into a nightmare-infected stage, because there's no reward for doing so. There's no time limit like there was last time, so it's not even about being more efficient. It's just pointless. Worst case scenario, you just keep getting a game over until the stage isn't affected anymore. It's random. As for the stages themselves, they have the same problem as X5, where they don't feel unique enough. And when they try to do something weird, it's rarely fun or interesting. At best, it's half-baked and doesn't last long enough to get any fun moments out of it. Why have this giant robot in the background if you don't actually get to fight it later? Or hell, just do anything with it. It just kind of blows up after you fight the same mini-boss twice. I did like Shield Sheldon's stage with the lasers, but it only amounts to maybe like one interesting puzzle to get to an alternate path. Like, what happened to most of the stage being on this cool minecart thing, or climbing up a tower to make you feel cool for wall jumping through it, or having a weird cyberspace speedrun stage? We needed more stuff like that. Okay, so after all that, you can finally go to the end stages. Honestly, I could have gone for the armors, but what could this game possibly do to me? I did get the energy sub-tank so I don't go insane, but the Falcon armor should probably be good enough to get through this game. Getting through this game was already a drag, so do I really feel the need to go out of my way to get all the upgrades this time? Not really. Let's just get through this. And that was the mentality I had going into the first gate stage. And it was the wrong way of thinking. Literally, the first obstacle is a wall of spikes that's basically impossible to jump over. Oh, you thought the armors were optional like they always were? Not this time. Like, how are you supposed to jump over this otherwise? You can use the ice burst to get this little platform to stand on, but it's such a precise jump and you have to do it multiple times. Now, there is a jumper part that you can equip to increase your jump height, but I don't know where that is. I didn't find it, and replicas can permanently die, so for all I know, I can't get it anymore. I actually tried to get through this as Zero instead because of his double jump, but I still couldn't do it without the jumper part. I'm sure I could, but getting past this is so irritating. And the next checkpoint is quite a ways away, so you have to be able to do this consistently. After like 10 minutes of trying to get past this as both characters, getting the Shadow Armor, which is immune to spikes, just seemed easier. The armor system works like last time. You can't use an armor set until you get all 4 pieces. And because there's one shadow armor piece that outright requires the blade armor, you have to get the blade armor before you can get the shadow armor. Backtracking is pretty much required, but it's not nearly as bad as last time. You definitely don't need to go back to the same stage multiple times. The armor hunt and item hunt in general is actually pretty straightforward in X6. Worst case scenario, you just need to find a hidden path here and there. The blade armor is actually pretty similar to the Falcon armor, but you have a much better charge shot and you can also air dash upwards. The blade air dash is kind of weird though. You don't dash until you let go of the dash button, so you just kind of stand in the air menacingly if you keep holding it down. Apparently there was also a charged saber slash if you hold up while releasing a charge shot, but I didn't know about this when playing. Whatever. The Shadow Armor makes you immune to spikes, but you can't use special weapons. It also replaces your charge shot with a stronger saber slash, which is okay, I guess. Basically, it's worthless aside from this one stage that you arbitrarily need it for if you don't want to tear your hair out. Why even make an obstacle like this? Why not have all these spike walls just be walls that you can't jump off of? It could have been a cool way to make you think about the levels differently instead of being stupid and dumb and killing you all the time. Aside from this one irritating obstacle right at the beginning, the first end stage isn't so bad. The boss is where things get aggravating. You have to avoid these big squares that fly around the stage, which I don't have a problem with in concept, it's just they made the boss too big. They move in a pattern that you can mostly figure out, but you have such a small window to get onto the walls to avoid them that it feels like it was designed around having the jumper part, because it's very likely that you don't have it. If the boss was smaller, I wouldn't really have any problem with it. Aside from more or less having to go in with the shadow armor if you don't have the jumper part, which makes fighting the boss much harder. Because again, you don't have special weapons with this armor. They went overboard for the second stage, though. They throw so many of these totem pole enemies at you that I have to question what the point of all this is. You have to kill like 5 of these damn things. It's just a giant endurance test. I found it easier to use the ice burst so that I could blade air dash to skip most of them. Fighting these things is just too much otherwise. The high max fight is definitely the worst part. No matter what I did, I couldn't damage him. I tried every weapon, shooting him in every spot on his body. Nothing worked. I felt like I was shooting at a brick wall. I could break his shields, but he should just make another one almost instantly. Even when he briefly lowered his shield, I could shoot him and make him flash, indicating that I was doing something, but his health bar wasn't lowering. After fighting this guy for like 25 minutes without even being able to damage him, I had to ask myself something. If I wasn't making a video about this game, would I still be playing it? No. Do I really want to spend my limited time on this blue rock suffering through an annoying boss in a game I don't even like? No. So I did something I never do in games. I turned on easy mode. And keep in mind that just before this, I played through Metaphor on hard for the entire game. That game gets bullshit at points, but I still enjoyed that. I played through Demon Souls. That game also gets bullshit at points, but I still enjoyed that. Mega Man X6 also gets bullshit at points, but I did not enjoy that. We really need to stop shaming people for playing games on easy. It's there for a reason. Some people just want to come home and have fun. Some people don't like to be challenged. Some people are just bad at video games. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Too many people get fed up with other people having fun wrong. What's fun to you might not be fun to someone else. Just because you like to be lobotomized on the regular doesn't mean other people do. Them playing the game on a lower difficulty doesn't invalidate your experience, your journey, because they chose an experience more comfortable for them. And I chose not to torture myself anymore. I don't care about going through this game legit at this point. I'm not here to prove anything. All this says is that if I didn't have that option, I probably wouldn't have kept playing because I don't care anymore. I don't care about Mega Man X6. I'm never playing this game again. So, to actually beat High Max, it turns out that you have to hit him with a charge shot and then hit him with a special weapon. Dude, that's so stupid. I never would have figured that out. I don't know if it's just someone beating this dude damageless, but he actually seems kind of easy now. I really wish I knew this while playing the game so I could have saved myself a whole paragraph. I think that if you keep hitting his shields with charge shots, he eventually drops his guard to let you damage him normally, so I think you can beat him buster only? But I don't really care anymore. I'm just moving on from this asshole. For the gate fight, you have to shoot these exploding energy balls to damage him. It's not that bad of a fight, but it takes forever. I probably could have beat him on normal, but I've genuinely lost interest by this point. Although I thought it was pretty funny that Ricky Hunter mode adds a floor to this fight instead of it being over a bottomless pit. The Sigma fight is luckily really easy. This is a genuine blessing after those last two fights. Like, you hit him with the metal anchor in the first phase, and it resets this attack cycle like a lot of stage bosses. Then in the second phase, he spawns a lot of enemies, yeah. But when you figure out that the Yamar option makes mincemeat out of them, they're not really that threatening. And they drop health and ammo pickups. By the time you actually need to use a second sub-tank, the previously empty one is already like halfway full. Sub-tanks refilling without being at full health was a very good change. I think they started doing this in X4. A very strange end to a very strange game. While I have been criticizing X6 a lot, hopefully it doesn't sound like I was complaining too much. X6 is a game most people don't like. There's plenty of people with much angrier deep dives into where this game went wrong. I tried my best not to beat a dead horse because that's pretty boring. I didn't think X6 was that bad, but I still didn't enjoy the game, which isn't surprising to me. Although, I suppose this isn't the whole picture. Some people actually do like X6, and I can kind of see why. I feel like there actually is a good game buried in here somewhere. It just needs a lot of tweaking and a lot of level design improvements. X6 is a game that I probably could get used to if I went out of my way to play it more. A lot of the game's character just comes from a new player not being used in all of his quirks. It's a pretty straightforward game once you know what to expect. If I played this game a lot as a kid, I probably would have grown to at least really enjoy it. That's kind of how I feel about Sonic Heroes. I was used to the slippery controls and unpolished level design because I played it a good amount as a kid, but it's pretty hard to come back to now that I'm not used to it anymore. However, if you want to play this game and want to actually have a good time without giving yourself Stockholm Syndrome, you should probably check out the X6 Tweaks project. I'm not going over the changes they made because I didn't play it, but I've heard that it turns the game into a pretty fun time. Although, at least to a casual fan, I don't know why you'd go out of your way to do this when there's so many other better Mega Man games to play. Now, X6 is far from the worst game I've ever played. I would never choose to play this again of my own free will, but if you held a gun up to my head, I probably would play it. You could pay me to play X6 again. You know, maybe one day. Like, comment, and subscribe. But you could not pay me to play Sticker Star again. Ultimately, while I didn't hate X6, I also never enjoyed it. I never had a good time. By the end, I turned on easy mode for 2 of the bosses because I couldn't be bothered to actually play it anymore. Look, I'm not gonna tell other people how to have fun. If you're one of the weirdos who actually likes X6, honestly, good for you. Keep having fun. This is just one guy's experience playing this. I still get comments every now and then on my Mega Man and Bass videos sounding like I attack them personally, and like, I don't get it. I'm just some guy. I'm not an authority on anything. Play whatever you want. Even if I say don't play this, that's just toward the average person that's on the fence about it. If you want to play it anyway, despite my warnings, and form your own opinion about it, who am I to stop you? X6 never did anything bad enough to cause me emotional pain. This game has never hurt me. I have nothing against it. I put myself through this. Mega Man X6 is obviously not a game I liked. Mega Man X6 is not a game I hated. Instead, I felt nothing playing it, which is probably the nicest way I could describe it. With more powerful consoles comes more possibilities. People are starting to feel that Mega Man X could use a big shakeup. So what better way to evolve the gameplay than to bring it to the third dimension? In comes Mega Man X7. Turns out that was a bad idea. You know, it's really bizarre how Mega Man X was consistently good up until X5, and then had two stingers in a row with X6 and X7. I'm not hiding X7's reputation. We all know about the bad voice acting, the terrible game design, and slow gameplay, which is why I never felt the need to play it until now. Most people haven't, honestly. Everyone on the internet was like, it's bad, and everyone else was just like, okay. So here I am, experiencing this for myself. Let's see what happens. Just like last time, X7 barely has a story, so I'm just getting it out of the way first. X7 actually starts it off as a new character named Axel. He's a member of Red Alert, a group of vigilante Maverick Hunters. As it turns out, X has retired from the front lines because he's tired of all the fighting. Like, I get the guy's been through a lot, he's never liked fighting to begin with, but isn't that the entire point of his character? He's a pacifist, he hates fighting, but he still does it because he knows that sitting back and doing nothing just leads to more violence. It's such a giant misread of his entire being that I have to question how anyone thought this would be a good way to create conflict. Why would X suddenly be such a whiny bitch? It doesn't make any sense. But because X eats unhappy meals now, you can't play as him at the beginning. Starting the game out as a new character is actually pretty cool. It forces you to get used to playing as someone else. You even get a taste of Zero to see how he feels before they let you swap between them. Getting to play as X last isn't something that I have an inherent issue with. It's just that you're not going to unlock him until like 6 or 7 stages in. That's just stupid, and I don't have to explain why it shouldn't take so long to unlock the titular Mega Man Twitter. It just makes you annoyed that you can't play as the main character for most of the game. That's like playing a Sonic game and not being able to play as Sonic until halfway through. Like, what? Anyway, Axel leaves Red Alert because their leader, Red, kept getting more and more violent, and he didn't like where the organization was heading. Not to mention that it felt like they were just using him for his ability to transform to other humanoid reploids. An ability that sounds overpowered, but is totally useless in gameplay. I'll get into that later. Red wants Axel back for obvious reasons, so he challenges the Maverick Hunters for a duel to determine who the real Maverick Hunters are. And they just accept, I guess. Axel uses this as an excuse to make up for his wrongdoing, so him and Zero beat up 8 more Mavericks like usual. There's a cutscene after every boss, but most of it doesn't really add anything. It does give Axel more screen time, but it's mostly just Axel talking to Zero and Zero being annoyed that he's talking to him. It's just kind of there. Most of it just feels like filler dialogue that drags out of playtime. I do like Axel as a character, and I think it's interesting that he resents his own copy ability because people just use him for it. But again, it's all just kind of there for the most part. They don't do much with it. Like, they set up this big mystery with Red Alert, like, oh, why did Red change? How did Red Alert use Axel's DNA to get stronger? It's Sigma. It's always Sigma. And that's the thing. The game has these political undertones, where the only reason why Red Alert exists is because someone thought the Maverick Hunters were useless. Because, you know, X and Zero really are just buddy cops when you start to think about it. A rival organization that's morally gray would be a really interesting dynamic. A group of hunters willing to do the dirty work that the official Maverick Hunters would never consider. They're still trying to do good at the end of the day. They just have a much different way of doing it. But they teamed up with Sigma, so all that's just thrown out the window. The game ends exactly like you'd expect. Sigma's defeated like usual. Axel tries to permanently join the Maverick Hunters, to which X says no to. But he's still there in X8, so okay. X7's story really did try to do something cool, but between the game giving up halfway through and the blah voice acting, it's just hard to care about any of it.
How can you say that? If we fight, we'll fall right into their hands. We can't allow this madness to continue.
Now, I don't think the voice acting is as bad as other people think it is. Anyone who says X4's acting is better is lying to themselves. It's just mediocre with tons of weird line delivery.
Dude, your breathing's getting heavy. Calm down. Anyway, in a way, this is exactly how I'm repaying Red.
It's not good enough to be enjoyable, but it's also not bad enough to be enjoyable. But I've played ZX Advent so many times that I might just be immune to how terrible the voice acting actually is.
I'm going to go ahead and meet our booty face to face.
Yeah, they brought back this cast for that game for some reason. I hope the actors did the best they could given the probably lack of direction. But if we can get these kinds of results twice, perhaps something went wrong with the production. Alright, let's talk about the obvious first. The game's 3D now. sometimes. X7 still has plenty of 2D sections, but there's also a lot of 3D. It's maybe like a 50-50 split. Axel and X even lock on enemies, so shooting is pretty easy. It's only really a problem when there's too many enemies, and using R2 to switch targets takes too long to get to what you're actually trying to hit. I kind of expected the camera to be annoying since you can't control it, but there were maybe only like 2 spots in the whole game where it felt like the camera didn't do its job right. Okay, you actually can control the camera, sometimes, but it's mapped to L1 and R1, and the right stick switches weapons. And it's not like the weapon wheel in Mega Man 11, it's just how it worked before, where you can cycle between everything, but now it's mapped to the right stick. I get that Japanese players and developers took longer to adjust how 3D works, but it's just a weird mindset in general. Like, what's the right stick supposed to do otherwise? Why use the shoulder buttons for this? Because the right stick makes you switch weapons, I just assumed that the shoulder buttons didn't do anything, and I didn't think you could move the camera, so that's cool. The 3D camera's fine otherwise, not much to really say about it. Ironically, I felt that the 2D sections could be a bit too zoomed in at times, not the 3D ones. I can kind of see why some might think the 3D sections are boring, because you can move a bit slow and you can run past a lot of enemies. But I think they actually managed to make the game control pretty well, aside from the lock-on thing when there's too many enemies. You do move a bit too slow, but the stages aren't big enough for the movement speed to bother me. The enemies definitely needed to be more threatening in 3D though. Most of them just stand around not doing much. If you look at Quake, they made the enemies more aggressive than they were in Doom, because they'd be too easy to ignore otherwise. Doom may look like a first-person shooter, but it was really just a top-down shooter from a first-person perspective. A truly 3D space gives the player more room to maneuver around. So if you want to make a challenging game, you have to make enemies that take that into account. X7 kinda doesn't. Every now and then there's even an obstacle that you can just move around. Like in Gungaru's stage, there's this wall that you're supposed to break, but doing a dash jump around it is so trivial to do that it's easier to ignore it. Especially if you come in with Axel, who has an air hover by default. The set air hover is weird, because you can't just activate it in the air. You have to keep holding the jump button after you jump to activate it. It's weird and awkward, and it killed me a few times. But speaking of Axel, he's a new playable character. At least he's supposed to be. Axel is literally just a worse X. I'm not kidding. He does less damage than X and has virtually all the same abilities. Axel doesn't even get a charge shot. Some rescued Reploids give you upgrade parts to increase your character stats, like your attack power and firing speed. And even before he started upgrading everyone, X still does more damage than Axel by default. Like, seriously, Axel does so little damage that you're better off switching to Zero when you actually want to kill something. Which is another new mechanic. Instead of picking one character, you have 2 characters that you can swap between. And it does make sense. They're an elite squad of Maverick Hunters. Why are they going in by themselves? But in practice, it's a bit pointless because you're just gonna pick X and Zero. There's no reason to use Axel once you finally unlock X. Axel does have a copy shot that lets him turn into certain enemies temporarily, which is really cool, but you also never have to use it. The game never tells you how to use it. I think you have to hold triangle to charge it up, then you can fire it, but I was never able to successfully activate it, so that should say how useful it is. You use it to rescue a few Reploids. That's it. No forms are useful enough to actually use otherwise. There isn't really that much to say about the other characters. X is literally just a better Axel, so I already told you what he plays like. Although Zero definitely doesn't feel as good as he did before. Like, I don't know, his saber slashes just don't have the same oomph as they did on PS1. It's hard to describe. Maybe because his attacks are so much slower compared to how lightning fast they were before. Also, the range of his attacks feel like they're just barely not long enough. There were quite a few times where it felt like I should be able to hit the enemy, but I couldn't. It's hard to tell where my attacks even land. There's definitely a lack of quality of life in X7. Look no further than how bad the UI is in this game. Like, I didn't realize that the stage you're selecting is in the top left. I thought it was on the right side that's being covered up by the stage preview monitor thing, which was definitely a stupid way of looking at this in hindsight, but I didn't know which icon I was selecting. That's just bad UI design. I've never had this problem with any other Mega Man game. It doesn't help that it also tells you the area instead of the boss. It also does this in X6 and X8. That's just weird. They always told you the name of the boss instead of the area they're in. It put more emphasis on who you had to take down instead of where he had to go, because you are just here to fight this guy and nothing else. It just felt more to the point. X7 is also bizarrely handholdy. Like, these people are telling me how to use a menu. I think I can figure out how to use a save screen, thanks. The stage results screens are clunky too. There's a weird amount of delay between pressing a button and seeing something happen, and you have to go through a yes/no prompt when you want to do anything. Are you sure you want to save? Are you sure you want to go back to the stage select? Are you sure you know how to upgrade your characters? Like, oh my god, shut up. Like, it just makes the act of going to the next stage slow and annoying. I never really commented on the menus before because I never had to. They were always out of the way and did what they were supposed to do. That's just what decent UI is. But in X7, it just adds a lot more friction to everything. Oh, and alias hints are just as useless as ever. I don't feel the need to make fun of this again. It's just sad at this point. The stages this time are actually a lot more memorable than the last two games. To my surprise, they started giving them interesting mechanics and themes again. A lot of stages in X5 and X6 just felt there, but pretty much every stage in X7 felt unique in its own way. Soldier Stone Kong stage is a bit basic. It's mainly a jungle with a stone ruins aesthetic, but it has a fun mechanic with the totems to move around. My only real issue with the stage is that the camera's too zoomed in and I can barely see 2 feet in front of me. Snipe Anteater probably had the most nauseating stage. It has that mechanic from Cyber Peacock where you can flip the stage upside down, except it actually means something for once. The orange tiles let you go to the underside of the stage and vice versa. It's a cool way to show off the 3D, but you watch this rotating animation so much that it's definitely gonna make someone sick. I don't usually get motion sickness or anything like that, and even I was feeling out of it by the end. It's an otherwise cool stage, I just wish they chose a different way to convey the stage getting flipped. And also didn't mess with the controls when it's upside down. Like, what was up with that? Ride Borsky stage is pretty dumb on paper. You ride a motorbike along a highway and you have to run over a bunch of bombs to defuse them. And if you miss one, there's no way to reverse it, so you gotta do another lap around the track to get back to it. But honestly, if you take your time, it's pretty easy. A little annoying, sure, but 3 minutes is plenty of time to get through this. The worst part is definitely this jump, though. The bike loves going crazy when you land, and I end up missing the closest bomb half the time. But other than that, this place is much better than I expected it to be. Like, the first time I saw this, I was like, ugh, this shit already? But then I finished it like second try after I got used to the controls and track layout. Honestly, I'd take this bike stage over X4s and X5s. At least this one's easy. The Tornado Tunyon stage is definitely the least interesting. It's basically just a long hallway with not much going on, aside from a few disappearing blocks near the end. I guess that'd be fine if, again, the camera wasn't so zoomed in. Seriously, why do this? The game doesn't look good enough to enhance it and show us all the nitty-gritty details. I appreciate that it's 60 FPS, but, you know, maybe that's why it's so zoomed in. And that's probably why enemies spawn like 2 feet in front of you. Now that I'm thinking about it, plenty of PS2 games ran at 60 FPS. Plenty of better-looking PS2 games ran at 60 FPS. I don't know, maybe this game just looks bad. Whatever. Anyway, good luck beating Tornado Tunyon's mid-boss with 0. He leaves you so little opportunity to attack him that you might as well just brute force it with Axel. It's not like it's a hard boss either, you just need an actual ranged attack to hit him consistently. Splash Warfly stage wasn't anything too special, but I really like being on this sinking fleet of air carriers that has to go around rescuing a bunch of Reploids. It's a really cool way to tie that mechanic into a stage theme. Vanishing Gungaru stage is pretty cool because this whole gimmick is giving you ride armors to play around with. You've got a turret one that can shoot everything and do a bunch of damage with mortar cannons, and you've got this spider one that can jump high and hit stuff with melee attacks. It's a pretty basic stage otherwise, probably to accommodate the bigger player size, but it's a cool gimmick that doesn't overstay its welcome. And too bad that the ride armors are never used anywhere else that I can think of. I actually really liked Wind Crow Rang stage. Jumping between planes on an air fleet that uses platforms is just a really cool idea. My only real gripe with it is that the heart tank was kind of annoying to collect. You pretty much have to kill yourself. It's like that one heart tank in X2. The laser cannons near the end are really funny because they can barely hit you when you ride up next to them. They don't do their job very well. Although the stage definitely did need some transition to the boss. You go inside this big airship, then you walk through a door and you're on top of the ship suddenly. Making this door some kind of elevator would have made so much sense. It could have been like Storm Eagle where it made the ship blow up before you fight him. Or how X5 at least had you walk onto the plane they used to fight the Skyver. Also, there's an unskippable cutscene whenever you die in the first section with all the planes. What? I saved Flame High Note for last. We all know why. I already said my piece about the voice acting, but this is the only time in the game where it's unbearable. But it's also kind of funny. Like, dude, you gotta say more than 3 lines. We can't just all say our favorite catchphrases all the time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. Like, comment, and subscribe. I can't just say that all the time. It gets annoying to people. Maybe I just think this is funny because of how much I've played Xenoblade 2. It's been 7 years and I'm still laughing at this. Why am I still laughing at this? Is Flame High in order what people think Xenoblade sounds like? The sound mixing in this game in general is pretty awful, especially in this stage. There's so many loud and obnoxious sound effects that I can barely hear the music. This track is actually pretty good, but I can barely remember it because of everything else that's playing over it. The music in general is pretty forgettable. The result screen, stage select, and boss themes are like the only ones I remember at all. I remember liking Soldier Stone Kong's music because it sounded like something out of Star Force. That was about it. The music sounds good when listening to it in isolation, but I just can't remember any of it after playing the game, other than the boss theme. theme. But believe me, when I beat this boss, my ears felt very relieved that I didn't have to listen to this mess anymore. It's only funny for so long. The part in the stage with all the lava everywhere is pretty funny too. With the glide armor, you can just glide past everything and barely even play this section. Game design is my passion. Although, speaking of the armor, the item collection in this game is actually pretty straightforward. We're back to one armor set, probably because you have to unlock X. You also need to enter the stage as X to collect the armor, but none of them are annoying to get to. Since you have to wait to unlock X to get everything, you may as well just save getting the heart tanks for X. He's gonna be your main damage dealer for the end stages anyway. I don't get this though. Even in X5, you could still get armor parts at 0, so why do I suddenly need to have X with me? Whatever. Weirdly enough, none of the upgrades require you to use any weapons. They're all just hidden out of view. Like how there's a heart tank and an energy tank on the pillars at the end of Gungaru's stage. Something you wouldn't notice unless you actually took the time to look around. Needing abilities to get more upgrades definitely added to that Metroidvania feel, and it was really cool. All the pickups here just feel placed around without much rhyme or reason by comparison. It just doesn't feel as satisfying to get everything, especially since there's no feedback for collecting pickups. Like, there's not even a sound effect that plays. They got this right the first time. The game pauses and shows your health bar growing. It makes you instantly feel stronger, even if one heart tank doesn't increase your health by that much. X4 onwards didn't pause the action to emphasize this. While you still felt stronger by the end, it was hard to tell how much a single pickup helped. In X7, there's literally nothing. No fanfare or no pausing, your health just increases with no indication that anything happened. It's so lame. Just like the weapons, there's only one weapon that actually seems to do anything good. The Volt Tornado does so much damage that it pretty much became the "I'm tired of dealing with you" button. Like, this thing does more damage to bosses than their weakness a lot of the time, including Tornado Tunyon. It's not quite Metal Blade's good. It has a pretty limited range and not enough ammo to abuse it. Zero's version of the weapon has you press triangle during a dash, so it's easier to abuse there, but it's a lot more awkward to activate, so it's far from overpowered. Regardless of that, it's by far the only weapon that actually does anything. I'm really glad I misread the weakness order and did Tornado Tunyon early. This thing's a beast. Axel and Zero do get some unique weapons that replace their saber or pistol. It's an awesome idea that's completely wasted because most of them barely make a difference. Axel gets a laser pistol from Tornado Tunyon, which does a little more damage than the default weapon, but not by much. He still gets the Volt Tornado from this, thank god. He also gets this grenade launcher from Gungaru, which makes Axel a lot more usable. It's just that depending on how you went through the game, you might not have beaten Gungaru before unlocking X, so why even bother? Zero gets a spear from Splash Warfly, but it doesn't feel that much different from the Z-Saber, so again, why bother? Wind Crowrang gives Zero daggers that can be used like boomerangs. This is actually really nice because it gives Zero a viable ranged attack, but at the same time, you're always going to have a ranged attacker in reserve, so you may as well just switch characters. However, the bosses are definitely a pain in the ass, especially Snipe Anteater. Dude just runs to the other side of the stage half the time, and attacking him is just annoying. And because the moving wheel is completely worthless, you need the Volt Tornado to even stand a chance against him. And Soldier Stone Kong kills you in like 4 hits from contact when you have the starting amount of health. And he always hits you like frame 1. Like, what the hell? If you fight him after you come back with X and his weakness, he's actually kind of easy because of the lock-on letting you hit him while he's in the background, but you can still take a lot of damage really quickly if you're not careful. Flame Heinard is kind of irritating, but once you get on top of the mech and hit him with a splash laser, stun locking him isn't that hard. But I did have to finish him off with a Volt Tornado because I never bothered upgrading my weapon energy capacity. But the other bosses are just kind of there. For a lot of the bosses fought in 3D, you can just keep your distance with X or Axel really easily. Their attacks aren't generally enough of a threat to catch you off guard, especially with Tornado Tunyon. During his second phase, his attacks are so laughably easy to dodge that you can just keep hitting him with Axel's pistol until he eventually dies. This took me like 6 minutes. Then there's Wind Crowrang and Splash Warfly that have Spark Mandrill Syndrome, especially Warfly with Zero. Like, the bosses in this game are all over the place, man. Vanishing Gungaru is at least a cool idea. You fight him piloting a ride armor and then you fight him outside of it, but he's pretty unnoteworthy aside from the basic idea of him. The worst part about all these bosses is how long they take. The endgame boss rush usually takes like 10 minutes, maybe 15 if the boss set is particularly annoying, but X7's boss rush took 25 minutes. And keep in mind that there's 2 loading screens in between each fight, so on PS2 it probably took an extra 5 minutes on top of that. I played X7 on Switch, and the Legacy Collection luckily makes the load times a non-issue. They're probably even faster on PS4 and PC. And honestly, this boss rush just felt flat out pointless. Boss rushes were always there to just pad out the game, but considering you get a near full sub-tank refill after every fight and lives don't mean anything, it just feels like a waste of time. it's not a skill check. If you could beat these guys when you're weaker, you can definitely do it now. If you're gonna make something like this required, why make it feel so tacked on? You could just brute force your way through it, even if you're exceptionally bad at video games. It doesn't add anything of value. At this point, the end stages are the only thing left to talk about. And honestly, there's not much of note here. The first stage has this giant steamroller chasing you for some reason. It honestly feels out of place. Like, there's no warning or build up to it or anything. You just go and storm Red's base and he's like, bet. This stage isn't even hard. The boss is a little annoying, but once you hit him with 2 explosions, it's pretty easy to take him down from there. Having to replay the second half of the stage when he dies is the real threat here. There was also only 2 end stages, which is a bit much. I feel you could have made the standard unmemorable end stage, then you fight Red, then the last stage is a boss rush, then Sigma. It feels like 2 stages smushed together for no reason. I guess it wouldn't be so bad if there wasn't a 25-minute boss rush, but there is. So yeah, it's a bit too long. There's a part where I pick a split path to go down, which is neat, but I'm not playing this again to see what was down the other path. I'm not sure why they bothered doing this. The Red fight is honestly a bit basic. You just move between platforms and hit him when he shows up. Don't stand on the same platform as him. Aside from the camera freaking out half the time, there isn't much to say about it. The first Sigma phase is like that too. Not much to say aside from his comically large gun. Once you get the patterns down, you pretty much win. Despite how menacing this giant death ray looks, you just crouch to avoid taking damage. That's it. It's pretty funny actually. The second phase took me a while to get though. And by a while, I mean like 20 minutes. Fighting a giant robot in space is pretty cool. This definitely feels like a final boss. I'm just not sure what I did differently when I did win. Staying on the left part of the stage just makes you more likely to not die for some reason. It's a pretty straightforward fight once you figure that out. Before that point though, you fall off the stage constantly, either from Sigma pushing you off or bad depth perception. The stage itself is more threatening than Sigma. Although it's really annoying that there's no way to refill your sub-tanks once the fight starts. Like, for how generous they were with health for the boss rush, they're very stingy with it now. When you get a game over, you restart at the second phase, so lives don't matter anymore, but still, it's annoying. Like, just put one of those giant health pickups on the starting platform. Like, come on. And that was Mega Man X7. It was actually a lot better than I expected. From what I heard watching YouTube videos about X7, I was under the impression that a 3D Mega Man X game was fundamentally flawed, but it isn't. It controls mostly like you'd expect it to, aside from the weird lock-on at times, and maybe the wall jumping feels a bit off. But I don't think this game did a bad job transitioning to 3D. There's potential here for something good, and the game's actually doing new things to shake up the gameplay, like being 3D. It has interesting mechanics and themes for its stages. It's actually doing things to address the problems I had with the last 2 games? What? I hadn't heard a single person ever say anything good about this game, so I'm shocked that I actually enjoyed it. I feel like I'm missing something here. I'm supposed to be having a miserable time, but I'm actually enjoying this? X7 was way less of a slog than X6. It took me 10 days to get through that game, but I was going through X7 at the same pace as the other games. I was waiting for this game to make some kind of cardinal sin that makes it completely unbearable, but it never happened. Like, did I play the same game as everyone else? I'm kind of at a loss as to why it's such a laughingstock. It feels like a weird experiment more than anything else. So I did something I never do with these videos. I watched other people's videos about it. I don't normally look up other videos on the same topic of something I'm making, just so that I don't subconsciously steal someone else's words, because I definitely did that early on. But at this point, I don't think it's possible for me to regurgitate someone else's opinion about X7. And like, I see where everyone's coming from. I can see why someone would think the game has boring level design and all that. I don't disagree with a lot of the common complaints. I just didn't dislike playing it. I guess I went in expecting the worst, to the point where I didn't even notice that sometimes enemies knock you down and you have to get back up. What? That was never a thing before. I can't believe they added tripping to Mega Man X. How did I not notice that? I definitely agree with Jay's reviews that the game needed to reinvent itself if it wanted to commit to being 3D. Just making another Mega Man X, but in 3D, was always a bad way to approach design in the game. Plenty of games had to completely change themselves to work with the Z-axis. Just look at Mario, who went from a linear side-scroller to an objective-based sandbox, or how Metroid was a side-scroller that turned into a first-person adventure. Having Mega Man X be some weird character action game like Devil May Cry or something could have been really cool, or even having it be something more akin to Ratchet & Clank could have worked pretty well. And to be honest, Mega Man Legends already figured most of this out anyway. Making X7 the way they did was just misguided in hindsight. Ideas that work in 2D don't always work in 3D. Ultimately, I don't think X7 ever did anything particularly awful, so treating this game like any other Mega Man game seemed more interesting than beating a dead horse and shitting on it the whole time. But don't just take it from me. X7 was a big reminder that you need to experience things yourself and form your own opinion on them. Don't let some YouTuber give you their opinion to substitute your own. Play the game yourself. Leave an angry comment detailing your own unique experiences playing the game, just as long as it's your opinion and not what someone else told you to think about a game you didn't play. X Legacy Collection 2 goes on sale for like $8 or less pretty often. Capcom could have absolutely pretended that X6 and X7 didn't exist, but they made sure to make them just as accessible as the rest of the X games, which I have to respect them for. Although, I still don't know why they didn't include Mega Man and Base and Legacy Collection 2, but whatever. I've been in a bit of a creative slump with these videos, if my output wasn't already an indication of that. And this video about Mega Man X7 of all things has been the easiest one for me to play through and write in a while. And I don't really know why. Look, don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that Mega Man X7 is some misunderstood gem or anything like that. This is still a pretty mediocre game. It's pretty easy to see why people don't like it. But at the same time, I find it hard to call it a Sonic 06 level disaster. I guess it goes to show how quality Mega Man usually is. Either we can have a mediocre game like X7 or Mighty No. 9 and people treat the game like a war criminal. At the end of the day, X7 is just forgettable. It's truly one of the games of all time. I don't feel it does anything particularly terrible, but obviously doesn't do anything well enough to warrant calling it good. You know, an IGN 6 out of 10 game. But for some people, I guess that's worse than being bad. It's taken longer than I was hoping, but here we are. We're finally at the final Mega Man X game. I haven't played this one before either. Okay, that's not completely true. I played the beginning of X8 a few years ago, but I didn't get past a single stage because I wasn't really into it. But I basically said the same thing about X3, and I ended up really liking that game, so who knows. X8 is pretty much unanimously agreed to be a good game, unlike the last two, so I doubt I'm gonna have a bad time with it. It's a game I probably should have played a long time ago. Anyway, let's get into it. Apparently humans are finally starting to colonize the moon, so now they have this fancy space elevator. X runs into the guy in charge of the space elevator, who has an army of Sigmas by his side. His name's Lumine, by the way, and it turns out there's a whole new generation of Reploids that can use Axel's copy ability. They're also immune to viruses and can't go Maverick. Then Vile kidnaps Lumine, so he can control the space elevator. Fight 8 more Mavericks. It's pretty much it as far as plot goes. Bringing back Vile would be cool, but he doesn't really do anything. He shows up in some stages as a mini-boss, but that's it. You could remove him from the game completely and nothing changes. I forgot about him every time he left the screen. There's still cutscenes in between each stage, and they're handled a lot better. Here, they're used more to build up relationships between all the characters and flesh out their personalities more. It probably helps that the writing in this game is much better than X6 and X7. Axel definitely could have came off as an annoying rookie in the last game, but he feels more like an energetic hotshot this time. His personality is a really good contrast to X and Zero's more stoic tones. The game also has 2 new navigators, Layer and Palette. Layer is the shy one with an obvious crush on Zero. Not that I blame her, I mean look at him. While Zero never quite showed any signs of being interested in her, he definitely warms up to Layer and even specifically wants her to be his navigator by the end. Probably leading to Zero finally being able to move on from Iris. You know, probably. Palette doesn't really have as much going on with her. She's the more upbeat one that's in charge of the R&D lab so he can buy upgrades. More on that later. And you know, while we're talking about the navigators, I really like Alia's redesign. I feel it fits her personality a lot better. As a kid, I always thought that she was a boy. Now, that may sound stupid, but I didn't read the dialogue in X5 when I was like 6. This image on the stage results was the only time I ever saw her. The short hair and face looked more like a boy to me. She wears pink, yeah, but Timmy on the Fairly Odd Parents also wore pink. Kirby's a boy, and he's pink. Like, pink may be the stereotypical girl color, but it never really screamed girl to me as a kid. Even now, my brain goes Kratos mode and screams boy at this image. I definitely wouldn't make this mistake in X8. We can actually pick which navigator we want to use in stages, which is a really cool idea. Alia gives you stage hints, Layer tells you about boss strategies, and Palette tells you about hidden areas and secrets. Palette is obviously the most useful of the 3. Even if you're an experienced player, telling you where hidden items are is really helpful. The other 2, not as much. Alia's hints tend to be pretty obvious to anyone who's played a Mega Man game before, but I can at least understand why a new player might find her advice helpful. Her hints this time aren't quite as obvious as go right. Leia is probably the only one that's outright useless. As far as I can tell, she doesn't tell you about boss weaknesses, and the bosses in this game aren't very complicated, so she just tells you about things that you're gonna figure out just by fighting the boss anyway. It also means that she may as well not be there until right near the end of the stage. Being able to pick a different operator and get different kinds of hints is a really cool idea. It's just that in practice, Pallet is the only one that actually tells me consistently useful information. Ayla is mainly there for beginners, and Leia has the same problem that Ayla used to have, where her hints are too obvious. But you can turn it off, so it's hard to complain about it too much. Real gamers can finally play the game completely uninterrupted. With the gameplay, you notice how much better everything controls, like, immediately. The game's back to being 2D, so there's no more lock-on, which means everything controls how you'd expect it to. X plays how he always has, but Axel can fire in 8 directions. While he doesn't have a charge shot, he fires shots so rapidly that it's practically a giant bullet laser. He's also got an air hover that lets you course correct your jumps, and you can activate it in the air just like you'd expect. X7 is weird. Instead of getting the same limited use special weapons after being a boss like X does, Axel gets different weapons that replace his regular shot. It's a really cool way to set him apart from X aside from being able to shoot in multiple directions. Although I have to admit that I mainly just use the ray gun and ice gatling for the most part. They more or less just replace his regular shot. It's still good for breaking enemy defenses, but in general, these two weapons just feel like a better version of his regular gun. His grenade launcher and homing dart thing are also pretty fun to use. I didn't end up using X's weapons much this time because his charge shot is so laughably good in this game that they weren't really worth using, but I'll get more into that later. The team-up mechanic from X7 makes a return too, and it's way better here. The character in reserve slowly regains health like they usually would in a fighting game, so I ended up using both characters I picked a lot more often. You don't die when one character runs out of health either, you just swap to the one that's still alive. Yeah, that was a thing in X7. X7 is weird. But you still want to keep both characters alive because now they have a team-up attack that's pretty much a Giga attack. It has low range, but it does do a good amount of damage. The intro stage in this game is definitely a lot more interesting than in most of the previous games. After the first game, the intro stage always felt like it was just setting up the story. It's used to show off the inciting incident, like how X4 showed Sky Lagoon falling into the surface, or how X7 showed Axel meeting up with the rest of the gang. But in X8, it's used as an opportunity to force you to play as the different characters and get used to all their strengths and weaknesses. And unlike X7, I felt like I was playing as all three characters about equally. I think I might have played as Zero the least, though. I don't know what it is about him in this game. In the PS1 games, he just felt so perfect. But he's missing a few standard moves here that made playing as him so awesome. The air slash was really spammable and really reliable before, but I honestly forgot that he could even do that in this game. It's just a lot of small stuff like that that makes Zero feel less satisfying to play as. He doesn't even get a spinning air slash. Well, okay, he does, but it stops you mid-air and you have to manually activate it. It's not the same. You can extend Zero's combo with upgrades in the shop, but I don't know, man. Whenever I played X4, I never thought that his regular combo needed more attacks. It already felt perfect, especially with dash canceling, but I didn't know that was a thing until recently. As in, after I already made the X4 video. Zero still plays pretty well in X8, but he definitely felt like the weakest of the three characters, especially with the weapons that Axel gets. Maybe this was their subtle way of telling you to go play Mega Man Zero, which you absolutely should, but that doesn't change how wrong Zero feels in this game. Now, the stages in this game are... let's leave it at interesting for now. For some reason, there are 2 bike stages. Avalanche Yeti stage is more of a shoot 'em up, and each character even has different projectiles. It's fine, but the part with the mini-boss is really annoying if you're not playing as X, because he's the only one with enough range to damage him from a distance. Otherwise, you have to wait for him to get close to you, and you have to dash up to him. It's just annoying. The stage only took me a few tries, though. Gigavolt Man of War stage is definitely the worst stage in the game. It's like this weird Star Fox section, and it's not totally obvious what you're even supposed to do. I think you're supposed to use boosts to catch up to Gigavolt so you can damage him, but I couldn't figure out how to do it consistently. I'm not sure what I even did differently on my winning attempt. You have to be quick about it too, since there's a time limit before a bomb goes off and kills you. Because of course there is. It's just not a fun stage. Luckily, there's no armor part or sub-tank here, so you never have to come back to it. Also, they're not even trying with these Maverick names anymore. What happened here? Why Man of War? Why Gravity Antonian? Why not just say Gravity Ant? Why Bamboo Pandemonium? Why not just say Bamboo Panda? Whatever. Although, most of them are fine this time, I guess. Burn Rooster being a Blaziken ripoff is kind of cool. Earthrock Trilobite is definitely one of the weirder names. He also has one of the best stages. You're being chased down by a giant robot for most of it, and it's hard too. Now, the stage isn't ball busting or anything. You can definitely get used to it after a few tries. The main parts I really struggled with were the 2 times where we actually had to fight the giant robot. As soon as you figure out what you're supposed to do, the stage is pretty easy. But let me just say that finally being able to blast through the whole stage without even trying was oddly satisfying. It's just a really cool, fun stage. Bamboo Panda is basically the ride armor level. Instead of getting ride armor throughout the stage, you're supposed to protect the same armor until the end to make the boss easier. But I couldn't do this because I'm bad at video games. It's a cool idea that's executed pretty well. I just hate this one part with the conveyor belts. One conveyor belt is going in the opposite direction of the other ones, but he can't see it very well, so he ended up falling off it and dying. It took me a few tries to even understand what was happening. Dark Mantis has a cool stage, but it's pretty standard. It's kind of a pseudo-stealth section where you avoid searchlights and lasers. I just don't like how hard it is to see when the lights are off. You can turn them back on Maxwell's A-Trans, but it's pretty much only there to get the sub-tank. It's kind of stupid how you're supposed to do it. I'll get into that later. Optic Sunflower is definitely the weirdest stage. Instead of playing a level, you play a series of challenges that you're ranked on. You get a fast enough time on them, and you get a rare medal. There are a few short sections in between each challenge, but if you're at least decent in this stage, it's over in like 2 seconds. It's a cool idea, I just don't like how quick everything goes by. I feel like this could have been some optional VR training mission instead of his own stage. I saved Burn Rooster and Gravity Antonian for last because they both have the same problem. While X5 through 7 had this kind of weird pseudo-infinite lives system where a game over just brought you back to the last checkpoint, X8 is back to limited lives. You get a game over, you have to restart the stage. Pretty standard stuff. But when I say limited lives, I mean really limited lives. In the previous games, you could die a maximum of 9 times before you had to restart the stage. Here, it's up to 6 times, and there's no way to get more lives in stages. You start out with 2 retry chips, and if you want more, you have to buy them. You even have to upgrade your capacity first. Luckily, the game uses up the retry chips that come back after the end of the stage first, so you don't waste too many of them. But I shouldn't have to tell you why needing to buy extra lives is inherently stupid. Keep this problem in mind as I complain about these last 2 stages. Burn Rooster stage is mostly an auto-scroller, which is annoying, but nothing too bad. But then you have this part in the boiler room. There's spikes everywhere, and the camera's so zoomed in that you can't see them coming. You're also not always in the center of the screen. The camera only starts panning vertically when you're far enough to the edge of the screen. I'm pretty sure it's there to reduce camera jitter and make it less nauseating to play. This isn't a bad thing, by the way. A lot of games do something similar. You probably never even noticed it. This works fine for pretty much every other part of the game that's mostly horizontal, but in this section, it just makes it even harder to avoid the spikes. There's no way to react to it fast enough unless you already have this section memorized from having to play it so much. It all leads to a section where you're constantly dying from things you can barely see coming. It doesn't feel fair. Had there been pseudo-infinite lives like the last 3 games, I probably wouldn't even be complaining about this. It would be annoying, sure, but at least I wouldn't have to sit through the boring auto-scroller section to get back to this. Gravity Ant is a problem for opposite reasons. The stage is actually really fun and cool. You hit these switches to shift the gravity. It's not even like previous attempts of this in the X series where it was mostly faked and you didn't have to engage with the actual mechanic much. The entire stage is built around this idea, and it's a really fun stage that's executed well. But then there's a single section that's overly difficult and you end up having to replay the first part of the stage so much that it's not fun anymore. There's these spike blocks that move around. You have to keep dodging them until they disappear so you can move on. It's a lot harder than it looks, especially in the 3rd phase where everything's moving around so much that it's hard to follow what's going on. And because there's spikes, all it takes is one wrong move before you have to start the whole thing over. It's an obstacle that requires a lot of trial and error to figure out where you're supposed to be and when. Something that wouldn't really be a problem if you could try it as many times as you want. But weirdly enough, on one attempt at this, Vile showed up instead of the blocks, and he was laughably easy by comparison. So I just moved further on in the stage without actually overcoming the obstacle that I was supposed to. And I probably would have beaten the stage if Pallet hadn't told me there was another teleporter in this room, which instantly told my monkey gamer brain this is definitely where the armor part was. And then I wasted all my lives trying to get to it. I had to look it up after to see if I was crazy, and yep, that teleporter led to the armor part. I was actually kind of mad that I was right, because at least if I was wrong, it would have been funny. This puzzle is just annoying. Now, I eventually figured out that you're supposed to stay on the right side of the screen to get past the spike block room. It's not that hard once you figure it out, but it took me like 50 minutes of pain to get there. And it probably would have taken way less time if I just had pseudo-infinite lives like the last 3 games. Now, I've been complaining about this a lot, but it really does ruin these 2 stages in particular. Burn Rooster stage is still kind of boring because it's an auto-scroller, but at least it wouldn't be frustrating when I can just try as many times as I needed to. It's not that they made the game too hard. Again, it's just frustrating. Being forced to play sections that I already finished and can clearly beat is not enjoyable. I'm really glad this is a common criticism of X8 because it feels like everyone's just collectively realized how pointless lives always were. Even just having a regular live system where you can at least get more of them in stages would be better than what this game has. They could even let you buy extra lives with metal. I know I keep repeating myself saying how annoying retry chips are, but it really did impact my enjoyment of X8. This isn't fun. Even with how lackluster the last 2 games were, I think I was actually having more fun playing X7, as insane as that sounds. It turns out I actually would take boring over frustrating. It's not just the lives thing. The stages aren't really that fun to me either. Most of these stages are cool ideas in a vacuum, but having all of them in the same game is too much. There's only like one regular stage with no gimmicks, and even that revolved around being a pseudo-stealth section. There's too much variety here. X8 really needed more time or I just played the game normally. This game almost feels like it has third game 3D platformer syndrome. Like how Spyro Year of the Dragon has all these extra playable characters that aren't nearly as fun to play as Spyro, and weird, dumb mini-games like skateboarding. Or how Crash 3 has so many vehicle sections and gimmick levels that you really just wanted to get back to playing the regular gameplay. Or how Sly 3 had to juggle so many playable characters and playstyles that you didn't really play as Sly that much. It never made any of these games bad or anything, but it was really annoying that you essentially got less of the gameplay you'd come to expect from a game like this. It just made it kind of alienating to a lot of people. X8 really could have used less interesting stages, as weird as that sounds. No bike levels, no challenges, no ride armor, just normal-ass stages without any major gimmicks. For a game that feels so good to play in the moment, there isn't much opportunity to take advantage of that. Even if I was playing this game on a PS2 emulator with save states to give myself infinite lives, you still don't get to play the fun part of the game long enough. The first end stage where you're riding up the Jacob's elevator is probably the best part of the whole game. All you're really doing is fighting enemies, but it's such a fun way to test out your combat skills and abilities. If X8 had more levels like this, there wouldn't really be a problem. I could go over the item collection in this game, but to be honest, it barely even matters. You don't actually find new upgrades in stages. You find rare metals that you then have to spend your metal on in order to use. Like when you find a sub-tank ship, you don't just get the sub-tank. You also have to spend 1,000 metal in order to actually equip it. Luckily, that amount of metal is nothing, but it takes the fun out of finding new stuff. Why bother going out of my way for this when I have to grind up money in order to use it in the first place? Why not have it where you can buy all this stuff from the beginning, but if you find the rare metal for it, you can just buy it at a heavy discount or something? That could have been a good compromise between having you look for stuff while still making metal important. I'd still prefer if you just give it to me when I find it, but for the sake of trying something different, I think that would have gotten the job done. In all fairness, you can buy stuff like sub-tank refills, so that is a good change, but the whole metal system just feels unnecessary in practice. I'd rather just explore the stages and find upgrades, like it was in every other game. Part of the fun of Metroidvanias is exploring every nook and cranny to make yourself stronger over time. Here it feels more like an RPG where you spend money to upgrade your characters. That kind of upgrade system can be fun in its own way, but only when it doesn't require me to also find it in the first place. Like, X8 is trying to do both, which isn't as satisfying as one or the other. It ends up being irritating instead of fun, and it made me avoid the whole thing as much as possible. I mainly just spent my money on the life increases for all the characters and got the sub-tank that I was able to. And it was surprisingly convoluted to get. In Dark Mantis' stage, you have to use Axel's Ace Trans to copy a sword robot to get past a security guard, to power a generator, turn the lights back on, and then use Trilobite's weapon to, I guess, dig it out of the ground with a crystal? What? I would not have found this on my own. The other sub-tank is an Optic Sunflower stage by getting a high score in 5 to 7 of the challenges. Not 8, because that gives you a separate upgrade that generates metal while you walk around, which is also a bit pricey to actually buy once you quote-unquote earned it. I tried my best to get the one from Optic Sunflower, but I just couldn't do it. When you can just buy an energy bottle from the store instead, this felt like too much effort, especially since I didn't even need it. Now, I'm sure the comments are gonna tell me skill issue for not getting this. Luckily, the armor is a lot more straightforward to collect. There's no extra money stupidness to go through. Although we do need to switch to X in order to activate the capsule for some reason. Seriously, why is it still like this? X5 got it right the first time. The other character just gives the data to X later. Like, it doesn't require a complicated explanation. It's just annoying. And every stage except Gigavolt has an armor part, so you always need to bring X with you if you don't want to backtrack later. Anyway, the armor parts are actually really good in this game. Almost too good. We're back to having 2 armor sets, but you can mix and match the parts from each set. It was always really weird how in an X5 and X6, you can only use armor parts after you get all 4 parts. But this idea is even better. The red Icarus armor gives you a higher jump, more powerful charge shots, double defense, and being able to damage enemies by jumping near them. Can you tell which part's kinda useless? The blue Hermes parts gives you a triple charge shot, faster charging time, faster movement speed, and being impervious to weak attacks. You even get a bonus if you equip the whole set at once. The Icarus armor gives you a Giga Crash screen nuke, and the Hermes armor gives you X Drive, which temporarily gives you faster movement speed, faster charge shots, and more projectiles from the charge shots. Whether or not you even care about the bonus is just preference. Neither one is that good. The Icarus armor is definitely the better of the two, but honestly, you might be better off just swapping out being able to damage enemies by jumping near them system for a faster charge shot, and then it's down to whether you want faster movement or higher jumps. The armor system in this game is really cool on paper, but the Icarus armor is so much better than the Hermes armor that it makes it inherently less interesting. The Icarus charge shot is so good that you mainly just want to be spamming that as much as possible. X's weapons are kind of useless for the most part because of how good this level 2 charge shot is. Not the giant laser you get from the 3rd level of charge. This level 2 charge is so spammable that all of X's other methods of attack become obsolete. I went with the full Icarus armor when I played because I thought the Giga Crush would be useful, but you already have one in the form of your team attack, so yeah. Just use the set that I was talking about before, and the end game is a total joke. I already mentioned the first end stage of X8. This elevator ride is awesome, but the rest of the end game is pretty standard. Nothing really happens until the end. The end stages this time are actually pretty easy compared to the main stages, and I didn't mind that. I appreciate that they saw how annoying this limited lives thing is and designed the final stages with that in mind. Assuming you got all the armor parts, bought all the retried ship and health upgrades, and at least one sub-tank, there's nothing here that's going to take you more than a few tries. I only had to get back to the final boss once, and that was it. After you make it through this moon palace, going through it again is pretty easy. They even had the decency to make the boss rush his own stage, aside from an extra Sigma fight that's really easy. The final boss is a pretty fun fight, too. Sigma's got this really cool Demon King motif to him that just screams final boss. There's not much to say about the fight itself, it's pretty easy to figure out, but it's fun, which is really refreshing. But in the plot twist of the century, Sigma was not the real bad guy. Lumine was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. You know, the guy in charge of the Jacobs project and the giant space elevator. You remember him, right? From the beginning of the game, and then he's pretty much never mentioned again. Yeah, him. Anyway, the first phase against Lumine is definitely my favorite part of the whole fight. He fights using attacks from the stage bosses and has a shifting weakness to go with whatever he's using. It's a really fun idea for a fight, and it's a great alternative to an actual boss rush. Or at least it would be if this game didn't also have a boss rush. Like, seriously, why? You solved the age-old tradition of boss rushes. This is more interesting. Don't have both. Both is just stupid. The final phase against biblically accurate Lumine is probably my least favorite part of the fight, but that's only because you can accidentally fall off the stage and die instantly. With a camera angle, I assumed that the edges were just invisible walls. I didn't think that walking slightly off camera would flat out kill you. He also has an attack near the end where if you don't keep breaking his guard, he just kills you. Luckily, Axel's grenade launcher will break it instantly, but it's a really cheap shot that's definitely gonna give someone a game over. The ending is weird, because it ends up feeling more like setup for the next game than an actual conclusion. Lumine reveals that the new generation Reploids that are immune to viruses and can't go Maverick actually can go Maverick. They just have the ability to choose. It sets up an interesting idea going forward that newer Reploids have the ability to choose whether to be good or bad, that they have more free will than the previous models did. And after Lumine is defeated, Axel seems to be infected with some kind of Lumine virus. But because the game never got a follow-up, it's hard for me to care about where it's going. The ideas it presents are interesting, and it would make for a good sequel, but those ideas were obviously never explored. X8 is like, hey, look at all these new character dynamics and new conflicts, and was never able to do anything with them. They probably did intend to make an X9, but that doesn't change the fact that X9 doesn't exist. It's the Half-Life problem. It doesn't matter how good the setup is. If you never follow up on it and the player knows you'll never follow up on it, it's hard to actually care about where any of this is going. We're closing in on 6 years since I reviewed Mega Man 11. 6 years since the last time I looked at Mega Man, and nothing's changed. Unless hell freezes over and I have to rewrite this entire paragraph, there hasn't been a new Mega Man game in almost 7 years. We've only had collections since then. Really high quality collections, but still. Also play Mega Man Battle Network. This is not optional. We did get a gotcha mobile game, but I was burned out on mobile games long ago. There's just a worse version of a game I'd rather be playing 99% of the time. Even if it's one of the good ones, it's hard to justify spending my money on that. It's hard to justify spending my time on this. Finishing X8 just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Too many possibilities that were never meant to be. It left me wanting more. A follow-up that actually did something with the seeds that X8 was planting. The setup is only as good as the payoff, so when there isn't a payoff, it all just feels like a waste. Not that any of this is the game's fault, it's just depressing. So yeah, that was the last Mega Man X game. I could probably still talk about the extreme games or command mission, but I've talked about Mega Man X for way too long. I'm just leaving it here. I might have skimmed over X8 a bit, but honestly, what else is there to really say about these games? It did add a new Game Plus mode, which is probably where Maverick Hunter X got the idea. You can also unlock the navigators as playable characters. It's got some cool extras, but it's not really worth going over. As for the X series as a whole, I appreciate that they tried to do something different from the classic games by experimenting more, but in hindsight, they really should have experimented less. By throwing so much at the wall, they never had time to refine the weird ideas they had. Like X5's time limit or X6's nightmare system could have been really cool if they were better thought out. And it was really a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. X1 knocked things so out of the park right from the beginning that they had to experiment more so that it didn't just feel like a worse version of the first game, which led to pretty inconsistent game quality. They were still good games. Mostly. But when the most universally liked game past the first was the one that experimented the least, I feel maybe they could have gone more in X4's direction. You know, keeping things simple and improving what was already there. Because then I feel pretty burned out talking about these games. While I did enjoy playing most of them, X1 and X4 are the only ones I could go back and play right now with no issues. And this is even with playing the X games over the course of a year. I hardly binged them. Mega Man X just ends up being a very strange series as a result. The classic games were more of a steady stream. You already knew what you were getting yourself into. But Mega Man X is a total roller coaster. You had no idea if this game was going to be the best thing ever or if it was something that was practically made by aliens. While I'm glad that I finally played through all these games, it's made me question how much I even like Mega Man. Luckily, I like the Zero and ZX games significantly more than the X games, but don't expect those videos anytime soon. I'm done. I'm finally free. Let me talk about something else for the next several years. Regardless of how I've made it sound, it's been fun. Take care, everyone.